At 3:30 in the morning, I woke up because my lungs were burning. It was not a cough. It was suffocation. I opened my eyes and saw nothing but a thick, oily black smoke crawling across the ceiling of my master bedroom like a living thing. The heat hit me a second later, a physical blow that felt like opening an oven door directly into my face. My mansion, the sanctuary I had built with my own hands after 40 years of designing skyscrapers that could withstand earthquakes and hurricanes, was dying. I rolled out of bed, hitting the floor hard. The air was cleaner down there, but only just. I reached for the nightstand where the emergency alarm panic button was installed. I pressed it. Nothing happened. No siren, no flashing lights, no automated call to the fire department. Silence, except for the roar of the flames eating the hallway. I knew immediately. This was not an accident. I am Lucius King. I spent 3 decades calculating load-bearing capacities and failure points for the federal government. I designed the fire suppression system in this house myself. It had triple redundancy. The only way it fails is if someone manually shuts it down at the main breaker in the basement and cuts the backup battery line. I crawled toward the door. The handle was glowing red. I could not go out that way. The roof groaned above me, the sound of timber screaming before it snaps. I knew the structural integrity of this wing. I had maybe 2 minutes before the ceiling joists gave way. I did not panic. Panic is for people who do not understand how buildings work. I crawled to the walk-in closet. Most people would think it was a dead end. But when I built this place, I installed a service hatch behind the shoe rack that led to the HVAC maintenance crawl space. It was tight, dusty, and meant for technicians, not a 70-year-old man in pajamas, but it was my only way out. I kicked the false panel in. I squeezed my body into the dark tunnel, dragging myself over fiberglass insulation that scratched my skin raw. I could hear the fire raging below me, the beast devouring my library, my office, the photos of my late wife. I crawled until I reached the external vent. I kicked the grate out and fell 6 feet onto the cold, wet grass of the backyard. I lay there for a moment, gasping for air, the smoke still filling my lungs. My chest heaved. I was alive. I stood up, my knees shaking, and stumbled around the side of the house toward the driveway. That is when I saw them. Standing by the front gate, illuminated by the orange glow of my burning home, were my daughter Tasha and her husband Braden. They were not screaming. They were not frantically calling 911. They were not trying to get back inside to save me. They were standing there fully dressed. Braden was wearing jeans and a jacket. Tasha had her purse over her shoulder. They looked like they were waiting for an Uber, not watching her father burn to death. I stumbled toward them, soot covering my face, my pajamas torn. Tasha. I wheezed. Braden. They turned. They did not look relieved. For a split second, I saw a flash of pure disappointment on Braden's face. He looked at me, then back at the inferno. The flames were bursting through the roof, now sending sparks into the night sky like a perverse fireworks show. "You made it out," Braden said. His voice was flat, emotionless. I grabbed his arm to steady myself. "Help me," I rasped. "The fire..." The alarm didn't go off. "Call the fire department." Braden looked down at my hand on his jacket. He peeled my fingers off him with a look of disgust. "I already called them, Lucius," he said. "They are 10 minutes out." 10 minutes, I looked at the house. In 10 minutes there would be nothing left. "Why didn't you wake me?" I asked, the realization starting to seep in colder than the night air. "You are dressed. You were awake. Why didn't you come for me?" Tasha looked away. She was trembling, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. She was staring at her shoes. Braden stepped closer to me. The firelight danced in his eyes, making him look demonic. He leaned in close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath. Fresh coffee. He had been up for a while. "We didn't wake you because you were supposed to stay in there, old man," he whispered. I froze. The heat from the fire was intense, but my blood ran ice cold. What I whispered back. "Look at it, Lucius," Braden said, sweeping his arm toward the burning mansion. "It is gone. All that wood, all that expensive furniture, gone. And you know what? It is exactly what you deserve." I stared at him. This was the man I had welcomed into my home. The man I had loaned money to when his real estate license was suspended. The man who slept under my roof. You did this," I asked, my voice gaining a little strength from the rage boiling up inside me. Braden laughed. It was a low, ugly sound. "Prove it. You are just a confused, senile old man who left the stove on. That is what the report will say. That is what Tasha will tell them." "Right, honey," I looked at my daughter. My Tasha. The girl I had carried on my shoulders. The girl whose tuition I paid. Tasha, I pleaded. Tell me he is lying. She finally looked up. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes were hard. I am sorry, Daddy, she whispered. But we had no choice. You wouldn't sell the house. You wouldn't give Braden the loan. We need the insurance money. We need it now. You tried to kill me for insurance money, I asked, the betrayal hitting me harder than the smoke. Braden stepped between us. You are worth more dead than alive, Lucius. You are just a burden now, a stubborn, tight-fisted burden holding onto a fortune you can't even enjoy. He poked me hard in the chest. This is what you deserve, he repeated, savoring the words. You deserve to watch it burn. And now you are going to rot in a state nursing home with nothing but the clothes on your back. Because guess what? I have the power of attorney. I have control of the accounts. And as of tomorrow morning, you are indigent. He smiled, a cruel, triumphant smile. You should have just died in there, Lucius. It would have been easier for everyone. I stood there barefoot on the pavement, watching my life's work turn to ash. I looked at the fire. I looked at the structural beams twisting in the heat. Braden thought he had won. He thought because he knew how to light a match, he knew how to bring down a structure. But he forgot who I was. I am a structural engineer. I know how things are built. And more importantly, I know how to find the cracks in a foundation. He thought this was the end. He thought I was broken. But as I stood there listening to the sirens wailing in the distance, I wasn't thinking about giving up. I was thinking about the fireproof safe hidden in the basement foundation. I was thinking about the cloud server where my security cameras uploaded their footage every 30 seconds. And I was thinking about the fact that while Braden knew how to start a fire, he had no idea that he had just ignited a war. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand tall while the people you loved tried to burn you down. Because what happened next when the fire investigator pulled into the driveway? Well, let's just say Braden's victory lap was about to hit a brick wall. The sirens arrived in a cacophony of wailing noise that shattered the night, drowning out the roar of the fire that was consuming my life's work. Blue and red lights washed over the driveway, mixing with the angry orange glow of the flames to create a strobe effect that made the whole scene feel like a fever dream. The first fire engine screeched to a halt, followed immediately by 2 police cruisers. Men in heavy gear jumped out, shouting orders, unrolling hoses, their boots pounding against the pavement. I stood there shivering in my torn pajamas, the soot drying on my face like a second skin. I was still gasping for air, my lungs raw from the smoke, but my mind was crystal clear. I watched the firefighters rush toward the house, spraying arcs of water that hissed and turned to steam the moment they touched the inferno. It was too little too late. The structural integrity of the roof was already compromised. I knew with the cold precision of an engineer that the east wing would collapse in less than 90 seconds. And then I watched a second performance begin. Braden, who just moments ago had been whispering venom into my ear, who had told me I deserved to die, suddenly transformed. His posture slumped. His face contorted into a mask of pure frantic concern. He ran toward the approaching police officers, waving his arms like a man possessed by grief. "Over here!" he screamed, his voice cracking perfectly. "Officer, thank God you are here. My father-in-law. We barely got him out." He rushed back to me, grabbing my shoulders with a grip that looked supportive to the untrained eye but felt like a vice. He shook me slightly, his eyes wide with fake panic. Dad, are you okay? Can you hear me?" He shouted loud enough for the officers to hear. He turned to the nearest policeman, a young guy who looked overwhelmed by the size of the blaze. "He is in shock. He breathed in a lot of smoke. Please, you have to help him." The officer approached, notebook in hand, looking from the fire to me. "Sir, are you injured? Do we need an ambulance?" I opened my mouth to speak. I wanted to tell him that this man had just confessed to arson. I wanted to tell him that the fire alarm had been disabled. But before I could get a word out, Braden cut me off. "He is confused," Braden said, quickly tapping his own temple significantly. He has been having episodes lately. The dementia. It has been getting worse." Dementia. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "We told him not to use the kitchen at night," Braden continued, his voice dropping to a tragic whisper. "He forgets to turn things off. He must have left the gas stove on again. I smelled it earlier, but I thought, God, I should have checked. This is my fault. I should have locked the kitchen door." I stared at him. The lie was so brazen, so technically flawed, it almost made me laugh. Gas stove. My mansion did not have a gas line running to the kitchen. I had designed it to be the safest house in the state. I had installed a commercial-grade thermal induction cooktop. It used magnetic fields to heat the cookware directly. It had automatic sensors that shut the unit off if no pan was detected for 30 seconds. It had heat limiters. It was physically impossible for that stove to start a fire, even if I had left it on max power for a week. "I do not have a gas stove," I rasped, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "It is induction. It shuts off automatically." The officer looked at me, then at Braden. Braden sighed, a sound of infinite patience and sadness. "See? He does not even know what house he is in half the time. He is thinking of the old house, Dad, the one we lived in 10 years ago. This house has gas. Remember, we cooked pasta on it last night." He looked at the officer with pleading eyes. He gets confused about the appliances. He thinks he is an engineer still. He has not worked in 15 years. The officer's expression softened into pity. He looked at me not as a victim of a crime, but as a confused old man who had accidentally destroyed his own home. "It happens," the officer said gently. "We see it a lot with older folks." I felt a surge of rage so hot it rivaled the fire behind me. I turned to Tasha, my daughter, my blood. She was standing a few feet away, her arms wrapped around herself, watching the flames. "Tasha," I said, my voice firm despite the pain in my throat. Tell him about the stove. Tell him about the alarm system. Tell him what Braden just said to me." Tasha looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed with tears. For a second I saw hesitation. I saw the little girl who used to sit on my lap while I sketched blueprints. I saw the daughter I had put through college. But then she looked at Braden. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her. A cold, hard stare that promised consequences. Tasha looked down at her shoes. She took a shuddering breath. "I am sorry, officer," she whispered. "My husband is right. Dad has been very forgetful lately. He leaves the burners on. We tried to watch him, but we were sleeping." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I am so sorry, Daddy. We tried." The betrayal hit me harder than the smoke. My own daughter. She wasn't just silent, she was an active participant. She was corroborating his lie. She was painting me as a senile hazard to justify their crime. I looked at the officer. I saw the way he was writing in his notebook. Cause of fire accidental. Suspected negligence due to resident's mental state. I realized then that arguing would only dig my grave deeper. If I screamed, if I shouted about induction coils and magnetic fields, I would just look like the raving lunatic Braden was describing. A paranoid old man screaming about conspiracies while his house burned down. I needed to be smart. I was an engineer. When a load-bearing wall fails, you do not yell at it. You shift the weight. You reinforce the remaining structure. I shut my mouth. I let my shoulders slump. I let my eyes go wide and vacant. I played the part. I was just making tea, I mumbled, lowering my head. I wanted tea. Braden exhaled a sound of victory. He squeezed my shoulder. "It is okay, Dad. We are just glad you are alive. Houses can be rebuilt. We will take care of you." He turned to the officer. "We can take him from here. We will take him to a hotel." "Actually," the officer said, gesturing to the ambulance that had just pulled up, "protocol says he needs to be checked out for smoke inhalation. He is coughing pretty bad. The EMTs need to clear him." "Of course," Braden said, his smile tightening slightly. "We will follow the ambulance." 2 paramedics approached with a gurney. They were efficient professional. They put an oxygen mask over my face and helped me sit down on the stretcher. "Deep breath, sir," one of them said. A woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read J. Miller. "We are going to take you in and check your lungs." As they strapped me in, Braden leaned over the rail. He wasn't looking at my face. He was looking at the pocket of my pajama top. I felt a sudden jolt of adrenaline. My phone. I had grabbed it from the nightstand when I woke up. I had shoved it into my pocket before I crawled into the vent. And when Braden had whispered those words to me, "This is what you deserve," I had pressed the side button. The shortcut I had programmed years ago for site inspections. 3 clicks to start recording. I had the audio. I had his voice clear as day admitting his malice. And Braden knew it, or he suspected it. He reached out his hand, hovering over my chest. "Let me get his personal effects," Braden said to the paramedic. "I don't want him to lose anything at the hospital. He gets confused with his phone." His hand dove toward my pocket. "Sir, please step back," the paramedic Miller said firmly, blocking Braden's arm with her body. "We need to load him. You can get his things later." "I just want to help." Braden snapped his nice guy mask, slipping for a fraction of a second. "Give me the phone." "Step back," Miller ordered. She signaled to her partner. They lifted the gurney and shoved it into the back of the ambulance. Braden was left standing on the driveway, staring at me with eyes full of calculation. He mouthed something to me as the doors began to close. "You are dead." The doors slammed shut, sealing out the noise of the fire and the sight of my traitors. I was alone with Miller and the beeping of the heart monitor. I pulled the oxygen mask down. "Wait," I rasped. Miller looked at me. "Sir, keep the mask on. Your oxygen sats are low." "Listen to me," I whispered, grabbing her sleeve. My hand was shaking, covered in soot and blood from the crawl space. "He is going to try to get in here, or he is going to meet us at the hospital. He wants my phone." Miller frowned. "Your son? Why?" "He is not my son," I said. "And this phone is the only thing keeping me alive." I pulled the phone out of my pocket. It was sleek black and undamaged. I looked at the screen. Recording saved. "Please," I said, looking into her eyes. "You have to hide this for me. If he gets it, he destroys the evidence. Put it in your pocket. Hide it in your bag. Do not give it to him. Do not give it to the nurse at the intake desk. He has power of attorney over my medical records. He will take my effects." Miller looked at the phone, then at my desperate face. She saw the fear, real fear, not confusion. "Sir, I can't," she started. "Please," I begged. "I am begging you, just until I can get to someone I trust. Just for an hour." She hesitated. She looked out the back window where Braden's car was likely already pulling out to follow us. She made a decision. She took the phone. She didn't put it in a biohazard bag. She didn't log it. She slipped it inside the inner pocket of her heavy EMT jacket and zipped it up. "I found it on the floor of the ambulance later," she whispered, winking at me. "I put it in my locker for safekeeping so it wouldn't get stolen. You can pick it up when you are discharged." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Thank you," I whispered. She pulled the mask back over my face. "Now breathe, Mr. King. You have a long night ahead of you." I closed my eyes as the ambulance lurched forward. I was homeless. My family had betrayed me. I was being driven to a hospital where my son-in-law planned to have me declared incompetent. But I had the recording, and I had a brain that had designed structures to withstand hurricanes. Braden had burned down the house, but he hadn't destroyed the foundation. I wasn't senile, I wasn't confused, I was plotting. And the next time I saw my son-in-law, I wasn't going to be the victim, I was going to be the wrecking ball. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and lemon floor wax, but I could still taste the ash on my tongue. I was sitting on the edge of the bed wearing a paper-thin gown that left my back exposed to the cold air. My chest ached with every breath, a reminder of the smoke I had inhaled while crawling through the ventilation shaft of the home I had built with my own hands. I was alive, but I felt like a ghost haunting a sterile purgatory. The door opened without a knock. There were no balloons, no flowers, no get-well cards. Just Braden and Tasha walking in with the casual indifference of people visiting a distant acquaintance they owed money to. Braden was wearing a fresh polo shirt and khaki pants, looking like he was ready for a round of golf. Tasha was wearing oversized sunglasses, hiding her eyes, hiding her shame. She stood by the door, refusing to come closer than the foot of the bed. "Well, you look better than the house," Braden said, pulling up a chair and sitting down backwards on it, resting his arms on the backrest like a high school gym coach giving a pep talk. "The house is a total loss, Lucius. A pile of charcoal. The fire marshal said the structural damage was total. Nothing to salvage." I looked at him. I looked for a flicker of remorse, a hint of guilt for burning down a masterpiece of engineering. There was nothing. Just a flat shark-like satisfaction. "So here's the situation," Braden continued, not waiting for me to speak. "We talked to the insurance adjusters this morning. They are saying this is going to be a long, complicated investigation. Complex claim. Could take months, maybe a year to see a dime, especially with the questions regarding the cause." He let that hang in the air. The threat was clear. Play along with the dementia story, or we drag this out until you starve. I need a place to stay, I said, my voice raspy. I need to come to your house. Braden laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Our house. Lucius, be realistic. We have a 2-bedroom condo. We have the dog. We have my home office. There is no room for you. Besides, Tasha is very sensitive to smoke. The smell on you, it would trigger her migraines. I looked at Tasha. She turned her head, studying the generic art on the wall. So Braden said, clapping his hands together. We found a solution. A temporary one, of course. We found a bed at Gentle Horizons. Gentle Horizons. I knew the place. It was a state-funded warehouse for the indigent elderly on the south side. It was where people went to be medicated into silence and forgotten. A nursing home, I said. You want to put me in a nursing home? It is an assisted living facility, Braden corrected, standing up. And it is not about what we want. It is about what is feasible. You have no home. You have no clothes. You are confused. You leave stoves on. You are a danger to yourself, Lucius. This is the responsible thing to do. He reached down and picked up a plastic grocery bag he had dropped on the floor. He tossed it onto the bed next to my legs. It landed with a soft, pathetic thud. I stopped by the Goodwill on the way here, he said. I picked up some basics, sweatpants, some t-shirts, underwear. It is not Versace, but it will cover you up. That is all that is left, old man. This bag is your entire net worth right now. Good luck. I stared at the plastic bag. I did not open it. I did not need to see the stained, discarded clothes of strangers to understand the insult. He was stripping me of my identity. He was turning me into a number. We will handle the paperwork for your admission, Braden said, checking his watch. The transport van will be here in an hour. Do not make a scene, Lucius. Do not make this harder than it has to be. Tasha, I said. She flinched. Tasha, look at me. She slowly turned her head. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were dry. I paid for that condo, Tasha, I said softly. I designed the layout. I paid the down payment. I paid for the renovation last year. There is a guest room. I know there is. I slept in it at Christmas. Braden stepped between us, blocking my view of her. That room is my office now, Lucius, he said, his voice dropping to a menace. And you are not welcome there. You are not welcome anywhere near us. You are a liability. Now sit tight, wait for the van, and try not to burn the hospital down while you wait. He grabbed Tasha's arm and steered her out of the room. She did not look back. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with the hum of the air conditioner and the plastic bag of rags. I waited 60 seconds. I counted them in my head, calming my heart rate. Then I pressed the call button for the nurse. A young woman appeared a moment later. Not Miller, my savior from the ambulance, but a different nurse. I need a phone, I said. My family, they took mine. I need to call my bank. I need to cancel my cards before they use them. The nurse looked sympathetic. Of course, sweetie. You can use the room phone, but you need to dial 9 first. Or, here. She pulled a tablet out of her pocket. You can use this if you need to look up numbers. Just don't browse anything weird. Okay? I thanked her. As soon as she left, I did not look up numbers. I opened the banking app. I knew my login by heart. I typed it in with trembling fingers. Access denied. I frowned. I tried again. Account locked. Contact administrator. I switched to my investment portfolio, the one with the stocks I had been accumulating since the 80s. User authorization revoked. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I navigated to the notifications tab of my email, which I accessed through the browser. There it was. An alert from the bank sent at 9 a.m. Notice of power of attorney activation. Reason medical incapacitation/cognitive decline. Acting agent Braden Cole. I remembered the papers. A month ago I had a severe bout of pneumonia. I was in bed high on fever and medication. Braden had brought me a stack of papers. Just standard stuff for the insurance, Lucius. Just so we can pick up your antibiotics. I had signed them. I had signed my life away because I trusted the man who married my daughter. He had activated it. He had used the hospital admission for smoke inhalation and his own false report of my dementia to freeze me out. He had total control. I could not withdraw $1. I could not write a check. I was legally and financially a ghost. I put the tablet down. I looked at the plastic bag. He thought he had checkmated me. He thought that by taking my house and my money, he had taken my power. He thought Lucius King was just a bank account with a pulse. But he forgot what I did for a living. I am a structural engineer. I do not just build things. I investigate why they fall down. I find the point of failure. And Braden Cole had a point of failure. He was arrogant, he was sloppy, and he thought he was smarter than the man who built the roof over his head. I reached under the mattress. I pulled out the burner phone I had asked Miller to buy for me with the cash I kept in my sock. She had slipped it to me during her rounds earlier along with my own phone that she had hidden from Braden. I kept my personal phone off to avoid tracking, but the burner was live. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years, a number that belonged to a man who didn't exist on LinkedIn or Facebook. Dante, I said, when the line clicked open. There was a pause, then a deep, gravelly voice that sounded like grinding stones. Lucius, I saw the news. A 3-alarm fire in the hills. I was wondering when you would call. I need a pickup, Dante, I said. I am at St. Jude's Hospital, room 304. Are you hurt? I am angry, I said, and I am broke. They froze the accounts. They are sending a van to take me to a state home in 40 minutes. I hear you, Dante said. I am 10 minutes away. Dante, I added. Bring the kit. The full kit. The full kit. The hydrocarbon sniffer. The thermal camera. The lockpicks. And bring the truck. The one with the winch. You going to war, Lucius? I looked at the plastic bag of used clothes. I looked at the empty spot on my finger where my wedding ring used to be. I had taken it off to keep it safe, but realized Braden must have swiped it from the nightstand before the fire. I am not going to war, I said. I am going to a demolition. I hung up. I stood up and stripped off the hospital gown. I opened the plastic bag Braden had thrown at me. I pulled out a pair of gray sweatpants that were 2 sizes too big, and a t-shirt that said Myrtle Beach 2008. They smelled of mildew. I put them on. I tied the drawstring tight. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like a homeless man. I looked like a victim. Perfect. I walked to the window and looked down at the parking lot. A black SUV with tinted windows was idling at the curb. Dante. I walked out of the room. I did not check out. I did not sign discharge papers. I walked past the nurse's station, keeping my head down, shuffling my feet like the confused old man they thought I was. I walked out the automatic doors and into the sunlight. The air was fresh. I took a deep breath. My lungs still burned, but it was a good burn. It was the burn of oxygen fueling a fire. Braden wanted me to disappear. He wanted me to fade away into the system. Instead, I opened the passenger door of Dante's truck and climbed in. Dante looked at me. He was a mountain of a man, scarred and silent, a former arson investigator who had been fired for being too good at finding truths that powerful people wanted hidden. You look like hell, Lou, he said. I feel like a new man, I replied. Let's go to the house. The house, Dante asked, putting the truck in gear. It is a crime scene. The police have it taped off. I know, I said. But the police look for accelerants on the floor. They look for burn patterns on the walls. They do not look at the skeleton. They do not look at the steel. I tapped my temple. I know where the bones are buried, Dante. Because I poured the concrete. Drive. We pulled out of the hospital lot just as the transport van from Gentle Horizons pulled in. I watched it pass. It was a cage on wheels. Braden thought he had locked me up, but he had just set me loose. And he was about to learn that you never, ever trap a man who knows how to bring the whole building down. The ruins of my mansion sat on the hill like the carcass of a great beast, blackened ribs of timber poking through the ash. The police tape, yellow and flimsy, fluttered in the wind, a pathetic barrier against the devastation that lay beyond. The fire trucks were gone. The gawking neighbors had retreated to their homes. It was just me, Dante, and the smell of wet charcoal that clung to the air like a shroud. Dante parked his black SUV in the shadows of the tree line, far enough away to be discreet but close enough to access the service road I had built for construction vehicles years ago. He killed the engine. The silence was absolute, broken only by the settling groans of the burnt structure. Ready, Dante asked, handing me a pair of heavy work gloves and a respirator mask. I put them on. The mask smelled of rubber, masking the stench of my destroyed life. Ready, I said. We slipped under the police tape. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear of being caught, but from the visceral pain of seeing my home reduced to this. I had designed every inch of this house. I knew the load-bearing capacity of every beam. I knew the R value of the insulation. Seeing it like this was like seeing a child in a casket. "Watch your step," Dante warned, sweeping the beam of his heavy-duty flashlight across the debris. "The floor is unstable." "It is not unstable," I corrected him, my engineer's brain taking over. "The subfloor is reinforced concrete. The joists are steel. Unless the fire burned hotter than 2,000 degrees, the skeleton is intact. It is just the skin that is gone." We picked our way through what used to be the living room. The grand piano was a pile of twisted wires and charred wood. The family portraits were gone, but I wasn't looking at the sentimental losses. I was looking at the structure. "Shine the light up there," I said, pointing to the main support beam that ran the length of the ceiling. Dante directed the beam. The steel I-beam was twisted, blackened by soot, but it was still standing. However, something was wrong. "Closer," I said. We climbed over a pile of wet drywall. I reached up and touched the beam. It was cold now. I ran my gloved hand along the flange. "Here," I whispered. Dante looked. "What is it?" I pointed to a clean, sharp cut in the metal, right near the connection point to the vertical column. It wasn't melted. It wasn't warped. It was sliced. "That is a thermal lance cut," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "Someone cut this beam. Before the fire." Dante shone the light closer. "You sure I am a structural engineer, Dante? I spent 10 years consulting on blast-resistant framing for the Pentagon. I know what heat does to steel. Fire makes steel sag. It makes it bend. It does not make clean, straight cuts through 3 inches of flange. This was done with a tool, a plasma cutter or a thermal lance." "Why?" Dante asked. "To ensure collapse," I said. "They wanted the roof to come down. They wanted to crush the master bedroom. They wanted to make sure I didn't get out." The realization hit me again. Braden hadn't just set a fire. He had engineered a death trap. He had weakened the structure so that when the heat rose, the house would fold in on itself like a house of cards. "Let's check the basement," I said. "That is where the suppression system is." We made our way to the stairwell. The stairs were gone, burned away. But the service ladder I had installed for maintenance was still bolted to the concrete wall. We climbed down into the darkness. The basement was flooded with 3 feet of water from the fire hoses. It was a murky black pool of ash and debris. We waded in. The water was freezing. I led Dante to the utility room in the back. This room was a concrete bunker. I had designed it to survive a tornado. The door was steel. It was still standing. I tried the handle. It was locked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key I kept on a chain around my neck. It was the only key Braden hadn't taken because he didn't know it existed. I unlocked the door. It swung open with a groan. Inside, the room was dry. The emergency generator was silent. The control panel for the fire suppression system was on the wall, its lights dark. I walked over to the main valve. The wheel was red massive and meant to be open at all times. It was closed. Not just closed, it was chained shut. A heavy-duty padlock was looped through the wheel and the pipe preventing anyone from opening it. "He locked it," I whispered. "He chained the suppression system." Dante shone his light on the padlock. "It is a master lock, new, no rust." "Braden," I said. "He asked me about the water main 2 weeks ago. He said the pressure was low in the shower. He wanted me to show him where the shutoff was. I showed him. I trusted him. I looked at the control panel. I opened the box. The wires were cut. Clean snips. The backup battery was missing." "He was thorough," Dante said. "He knew exactly what to disable. He had a map," I said. "I keep the blueprints in the study." He must have studied them. We left the utility room and waded back into the main basement area. I was looking for something specific. The origin point. Fires have a fingerprint. They start somewhere and grow outward. "Where did it start?" Dante asked, reading my mind. "The report said the kitchen," I said. "But the kitchen is on the 1st floor. If the fire started there, the smoke would have risen up the stairs. But when I woke up, the smoke was coming from the vents. It was being pushed. Pushed by the HVAC system. The fan was on. It was circulating the smoke through the house to ensure maximum asphyxiation before the fire even reached the bedroom." We waded toward the HVAC unit in the corner. It was a massive machine, a silent lung that had breathed death into my home. I opened the service panel. Inside, the filters were black with soot. But sitting at the bottom of the intake vent, protected from the water by the metal casing, was something that didn't belong. It was a small, melted lump of plastic and metal. Dante leaned in. "What is that?" I reached in and carefully pulled it out. It was charred, but I recognized the shape. It was a digital timer. The kind you use for garden lights. It was wired to a small ruptured canister. An accelerant, I said, and a timer. I turned it over in my hands. I could still see the brand name stamped into the plastic back. Torque. It is an incendiary device, Dante said, his voice grim. Simple, crude, but effective. He set it to go off at 3 a.m. When you were in deep sleep. He wanted me to die in my sleep, I said. He wanted me to breathe in the smoke and never wake up. That is why he disabled the alarms. That is why he cut the beams. I looked at the timer. This was it. This was the physical proof. The police had missed it because they were looking for a gas leak. They were looking for an accident. They weren't looking for a bomb. Bag it, I said, handing it to Dante. He pulled an evidence bag from his jacket and dropped the device inside. He sealed it. This changes everything, Lou, he said. This isn't negligence. This is premeditated murder. I looked around the basement. My workshop was here. My tools, my drafting table, all gone. Destroyed by a man who couldn't build a birdhouse, let alone a life. We have what we need, I said. Let's go. We climbed back up the ladder and out of the ruins. The night air felt clean after the damp stench of the basement. We walked back to the truck. I took off the mask. I looked back at the house one last time. Goodbye, old girl, I whispered. You did your job. You kept me safe long enough. Dante started the engine. Where to now, he asked. I looked at the evidence bag on the dashboard. I looked at my dirty hands. To the enemy's camp, I said. I have nowhere else to go. Braden thinks I am helpless. He thinks I am waiting for the nursing home van. I need him to keep thinking that. You are going to stay with him, Dante asked, surprised. After this? Keep your friends close, Dante, I said. And keep your arsonists closer. I need access to his life. I need to know who he talks to. I need to know where the money is going. And the only way to do that is to be the pathetic, confused old man he thinks I am. Are you sure you can do that? Can you look him in the eye and not kill him? I looked at my reflection in the window. My eyes were hard, cold. I am not going to kill him, Dante, I said. I am going to deconstruct him. Brick by brick, beam by beam, until there is nothing left but dust. Drive. Dante nodded and pulled out onto the road. We drove away from the ruins of my past and toward the construction site of my revenge. Braden Cole had started a fire, but he had forgotten one thing about fire. It purifies. And I was coming out of the ashes cleaner, harder, and more dangerous than I had ever been before. The condo I had bought for my daughter was a sleek modern unit on the north side of the city, all glass and sharp angles. I had paid the down payment. I had co-signed the mortgage. I had even designed the reinforcements for the balcony so it could hold a hot tub. But standing in the entryway, holding a plastic bag of used clothes, I felt like a stray animal begging for shelter in a slaughterhouse. Braden didn't offer me the guest room. That room he claimed was his sanctuary, his office, the place where he made his big deals. Instead, he pointed to the living room. There was a beige sectional sofa in the corner covered in a layer of white hair from their golden retriever, Buster. The dog was a good boy, but he shed like a snowstorm, and Braden clearly hadn't vacuumed in weeks. You sleep there, Braden said, tossing a thin, scratchy blanket onto the cushions. It landed in a puff of dust and dander. Do not get comfortable. The van from Gentle Horizons comes tomorrow at noon. This is just a pit stop, Lucius, not a residency. He looked at me with a sneer that curdled the milk in my stomach. And try not to cough all night, he added. Tasha needs her sleep. She is very upset about the house. You really traumatized her with your little accident. I looked at Tasha. She was standing in the kitchen pouring a glass of wine with trembling hands. She wouldn't look at me. She just stared at the red liquid swirling in the glass, drowning her guilt, one sip at a time. I laid down on the sofa. I didn't undress. I kept my shoes on. The smell of dog was overpowering, masking the lingering scent of smoke on my skin. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I lay there rigid as a steel beam, listening to the sounds of the apartment. I heard the shower run. I heard the murmur of their voices in the bedroom. And then around 1 a.m, I heard the heavy, rhythmic snoring of a man who sleeps the sleep of the unjust. But the night wasn't over. At 3 a.m. The exact time my house had started to burn 24 hours ago, the bedroom door creaked open. I cracked one eye open. Braden stumbled out wearing nothing but boxer shorts. He walked to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of expensive bourbon from the cabinet bourbon I had given him for his birthday, and took a long swig straight from the bottle. He paced the living room floor agitated, running a hand through his hair. He didn't check on me. He assumed the old man was asleep, medicated by shock and age. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and dialed a number. He put it on speaker, keeping the volume low, but in the silence of the night, it sounded like a shout. "Pick up, Tony, pick up," he hissed. A voice answered, rough and sleep-deprived. "It is 3 a.m, Braden. You better have my money." "I have it," Braden whispered, his voice trembling with a manic energy. "I mean, I don't have it in my hand, but it is coming. I did it, Tony. I torched the place." I stopped breathing. I lay perfectly still, my hand gripping the fabric of the sofa so hard my knuckles popped. "The fire is done." Braden continued pacing past the sofa, inches from my head. "It is a total loss. The whole thing is ash. The policy is worth $5 million. Structural damage, contents, everything. I talked to the adjuster. They are cutting a check next week. $5 million. My life's work, my legacy, reduced to a payout for a gambling debt. $5 million, the voice on the phone asked, skeptical. And the old man Braden laughed, a low, cruel chuckle. "He is sleeping on my couch right now, drooling on the dog hair. He is toast, Tony. I have the power of attorney. I am putting him in a state home tomorrow. One of those places where they sedate them and leave them in front of the TV until they expire. He won't last 6 months. Once he is out of the way, I control the estate. I will pay you double, Tony. Just call off the dogs. Give me a week." "You have 1 week, Braden," the voice said. "If I don't see cash by Friday, you are going to wish you were in that fire." The line went dead. Braden stood there for a moment in the dark, the phone glowing in his hand. He took another long pull of bourbon. Then he walked over to the kitchen island where his laptop was sitting. He opened it. The screen lit up his face, highlighting the bags under his eyes and the sheen of sweat on his forehead. He typed something, scrolled for a few minutes, then slammed the lid shut. He walked back to the bedroom, the bottle of bourbon swinging from his hand. The door clicked shut. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. I waited until the snoring resumed, louder and deeper than before. I sat up. My joints ached, but my mind was racing at 1,000 miles an hour. He had confessed. He had admitted to arson, to fraud, to a premeditated plan to let me die in a nursing home. But a phone call wasn't enough. I needed hard evidence. I needed the digital trail. I stood up and crept toward the kitchen island. I moved with the silence of a man who used to inspect foundations in the middle of the night. I reached the laptop. It was a sleek silver machine. I opened it. It was password protected. Of course. I looked at the hint. Wedding anniversary. I knew the date. October 14th. I typed 1014. Incorrect. I tried October 14th. Incorrect. I stopped. I thought about Braden. He was a narcissist. He didn't care about Tasha. He didn't care about their marriage. He cared about money. He cared about winning. I typed success. Incorrect. I typed millionaire. Incorrect. I paused, looking at the sleeping dog in the corner. Braden was simple. He was predictable. What was the one thing he wanted more than anything? What was the car he had tried to lease before his credit was denied? I typed Porsche 911. The screen unlocked. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I was in. I didn't browse. I didn't look at his photos. I went straight to the browser history. I needed to know what he had been looking at before the fire. I scrolled back 3 days. My stomach turned. How to disable fire suppression systems. Thermal lance rental near me. Induction stove versus gas stove fire risk. Can accelerant be detected in water damage? Average life expectancy in state nursing homes. He had researched it all. He had planned my murder like a renovation project. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the USB drive Dante had given me in the truck. It wasn't just a storage device. It was a keylogger and a mirror program. Dante used it for investigations. It would copy the hard drive in the background and record every keystroke Braden made from now on. I plugged it into the side port. A small window popped up, installing drivers. The bar moved agonizingly slow, 20%, 40%. I heard a noise from the bedroom, a cough. The bed springs creaked. My heart hammered against my ribs. If he walked out now, if he saw me, it would be over. He was younger, stronger, and desperate. He would kill me right here in the kitchen and claim I attacked him in a dementia-fueled rage. 60%. I stared at the bedroom door. The handle didn't turn. The snoring resumed. 80%. I looked at the desktop. There was a folder named Project Ash. I clicked it open. Inside were PDFs. I recognized them instantly. They were the blueprints to my mansion, my blueprints, the ones I kept in the safe in my study. He must have photographed them months ago. He had marked them up. Red circles around the load-bearing columns, notes on where to cut the beams, X marks on the smoke detectors, and at the bottom of the list a file named gas_line_schematics.pdf. He had studied the gas lines. He knew exactly where they ran. He knew that even though the kitchen was induction, the main line for the heating system ran directly under the master bedroom. That was why the fire had been so hot so fast. He hadn't just used a timer. He had tapped the line. 99%, installation complete. I pulled the USB drive out. I closed the folder. I wiped the trackpad with the sleeve of my t-shirt to remove my fingerprints. I closed the lid of the laptop. I crept back to the sofa and lay down. I hid the USB drive inside the lining of the Goodwill sweatpants right next to my skin. It felt hot like a coal. I stared at the ceiling. I had the evidence. I had the motive. I had the method. Braden thought the game was over. He thought he was waiting for a check, but he didn't realize that the check was going to bounce. Tomorrow, the insurance adjusters were coming to interview me. Braden expected me to play the confused old man. He expected me to nod and drool and sign whatever they put in front of me. And I would. I would play the role of a lifetime. Because the closer he thought he was to the money, the more careless he would become. I needed him to feel safe. I needed him to feel victorious. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I visualized the structure of Braden's life. It was a poorly built house held together by lies and debt, and I had just found the demolition switch. The next morning, the air in Braden's condo was thick with the smell of stale coffee and desperation. I was sitting on the beige sectional sofa, still wearing the oversized gray sweatpants and the stained t-shirt from the donation bag. I felt less like a man and more like a prop in a stage play that Braden was directing. He was pacing back and forth in front of the window, checking his watch every 30 seconds, wiping his sweaty palms on his khaki trousers. He had made Tasha clean the living room 3 times, screaming at her about dog hair and dust, terrified that a speck of dirt might somehow derail the $5 million check he was expecting. He stopped pacing and loomed over me. His shadow fell across my face, cold and suffocating. "Listen to me, Lucius," he hissed, leaning down so his face was inches from mine. "The adjuster will be here in 5 minutes. His name is Mr. Henderson. He's going to ask you about the fire. He's going to ask you about the timeline." I looked at him, keeping my expression blank. "The timeline," I repeated slowly, letting my voice waver. "Yes, the timeline," Braden snapped. "But you do not know the timeline. Do you understand? You were confused. You were tired. You do not remember turning anything on or off. If he asks about the stove, you are not sure. If he asks about the alarm, you didn't hear it. You are old. You are sick. You are a tragic figure, Lucius. Play the part and you get a nice private room at the nursing home. Screw it up and you are on the street." I stared at his neck. I could see the pulse thumping rapidly in his jugular vein. He was terrified. He was a gambler who had pushed all his chips into the center of the table, and now he was waiting for the dealer to turn the river card. The doorbell rang. It was a sharp electronic chime that made Tasha drop a spoon in the kitchen. Braden straightened up instantly. He smoothed his hair. He put on a smile that looked like it had been painted on with enamel. He pointed a warning finger at me one last time before walking to the door. "Showtime, Dad," he whispered. He opened the door. 2 men stood there. The first was a tall, thin man in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. He held a leather briefcase and had the weary, cynical eyes of a man who spent his life calculating the value of human tragedy. This was Mr. Henderson, the senior adjuster from National Guardian Insurance. Behind him was a larger man wearing a cheap, ill-fitting blue blazer and holding a clipboard. He wore thick glasses and a baseball cap pulled low, looking like a junior trainee or a heavy lifter. My heart skipped a beat. It was Dante. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor, shuffling his feet, playing the role of the invisible assistant perfectly. But as he stepped into the room, he adjusted his cap, and for a split second his eyes locked with mine. He gave a microscopic wink. A signal. "I am here. The trap is set." Mr. Cole Henderson asked, extending a hand. "I am Robert Henderson. This is my associate, Mr. Smith. We are here to take the statements regarding the property on Highland Avenue. Please come in." "Come in." Braden said, ushering them into the living room. "Can I get you anything? Water, coffee?" "No, thank you," Henderson said, walking straight to the armchair across from the sofa. He sat down and opened his briefcase, pulling out a voice recorder and a thick file. Dante stood by the wall pen poised over his clipboard, silent as a shadow. Henderson looked at me. He took in the stained shirt, the shaking hands, the way I was huddled in the corner of the sofa. "This is Mr. King?" Henderson asked. "The policyholder." "Yes," Braden said, sitting next to me and placing a protective hand on my knee. "This is Lucius, my father-in-law. He is having a good day today, mostly, but the shock has been hard on him." Henderson nodded and turned on the recorder. "Mr. King, I need to ask you a few questions about the night of October 14th. Can you tell me what you were doing prior to the fire starting?" I cleared my throat. I looked at Henderson. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to tell him about the cut beams. I wanted to tell him about the timer in the basement. I wanted to scream that the man sitting next to me was a monster who had tried to incinerate me in my sleep. But I knew the game. If I fought now, if I accused Braden without the final nail in the coffin, the insurance company would freeze the investigation. They would drag it out for months. Braden would get desperate. He might run. He might hurt Tasha to silence her. I needed him to feel safe. I needed him to believe he had won so that he would walk into the real ambush we had planned. I was reading," I said, making my voice tremble, "in the library." And then Henderson asked, "Did you use the kitchen?" I hesitated. I made tea. I think." Braden squeezed my knee. Hard. "Mr. Henderson," Braden interrupted, his voice dripping with faux apology. "We should probably be upfront about Dad's condition. He has been struggling with early onset Alzheimer's for the last 6 months. We have been trying to manage it, but, well, he gets cold at night." "Alzheimer's?" Henderson asked, writing something down. "Yes," Braden sighed. "He forgets things, like the space heater." I froze. A space heater. "We told him not to use it," Braden continued, shaking his head sadly. "It is an old electric heater, one of those coil ones from the 80s. He keeps it in the bedroom because he says the central air is too drafty. We think he must have turned it on and it tipped over, or maybe he put a blanket on it. He forgets, you see. He just forgets." It was a brilliant lie. It explained the intensity of the fire in the bedroom. It explained why the origin point seemed to be near my bed, and it put the blame squarely on a defective appliance and a defective mind. Henderson looked at me. "Mr. King, do you recall using a space heater that night?" I looked at Braden. His eyes were wide, pleading, but underneath the plea was a threat. "Say yes, old man. Say yes, or you die on the street." I looked at Dante. He was scribbling furiously on his clipboard, but his posture was relaxed. He was waiting for me to play my card. I took a deep breath. I let my jaw go slack. I started to rub my hands together nervously, mimicking the tremors I had seen in the nursing homes Braden threatened me with. I don't know," I whispered. "It was cold. It was so cold. I might have plugged it in." The room went silent. Braden let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. "I just wanted to be warm," I added, looking at Henderson with watery eyes. Did I do something wrong? Is my house okay?" Henderson's face softened. The cynicism vanished, replaced by pity. He saw exactly what Braden wanted him to see, a confused, broken old man who had accidentally destroyed his own life. "No, Mr. King," Henderson said gently. "It was an accident. These things happen." He turned to Braden. "Given the statement and the preliminary report from the fire marshal which suggests an electrical origin in the bedroom, this seems straightforward. It is a tragedy, certainly, but it is a covered peril." Braden's eyes lit up. He looked like he had just won the lottery. "So, the claim, we will expedite it," Henderson said, closing his briefcase. "Given Mr. King's condition and his lack of housing, we can authorize an emergency disbursement of the structural limit, $5 million. We should have the check ready for pickup at our main office on Friday." "Friday?" Braden repeated, a grin spreading across his face that he couldn't hide. "Friday is perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much." "We will need Mr. King to come in to sign the final release," Henderson said, standing up. "Since he is the policyholder." "Of course," Braden said, standing up and shaking Henderson's hand vigorously. "I will bring him. I handle all his affairs now." Dante stepped forward then. He handed a form to Braden. "Just sign here to acknowledge the site visit, Mr. Cole." Braden signed it without reading. He didn't even look at the man holding the clipboard. He didn't notice the calloused hands of an arson investigator. He didn't notice the way Dante looked at the signature, analyzing the pressure, the arrogance of the stroke. "Thank you," Dante mumbled. They walked to the door. Henderson paused and looked back at me. "Take care of him," Mr. Cole Henderson said. "He has lost everything." "Oh, I will," Braden said, closing the door. "I will take care of him for the rest of his life." As soon as the latch clicked, Braden spun around. He punched the air. He let out a whoop of joy that shook the walls. "Yes," he screamed. "Did you hear that, Friday 5 million? We are rich, baby. We are free." He ran to the kitchen and grabbed Tasha, spinning her around. She looked terrified, but she managed a weak smile. "And you," Braden said, pointing at me. "You actually did it. You pulled it off. I didn't think you had it in you, old man." I sat on the sofa, staring at my hands. I didn't say anything. "You earned your keep today," Lucius Braden said, walking over and patting my cheek. It was a condescending tap, like you would give a dog. "You just bought yourself a very nice pillow at the nursing home. Maybe I will even spring for the room with a window." He laughed and went to the fridge to open a bottle of champagne. I sat there listening to the cork pop. I listened to him toast his victory. He thought he had won. He thought the check was coming. He thought I was broken. But he didn't see Dante's wink. He didn't know that the Mr. Smith who had just walked out of his apartment wasn't an assistant. He was a witness. And he wasn't carrying a clipboard full of notes. He was carrying a hidden camera that had just recorded Braden coaching a senile man to lie about a space heater that never existed. Braden was celebrating Friday. I was celebrating Friday too, because Friday wasn't payday. Friday was Judgment Day. The door clicked shut behind Braden, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent apartment. He had gone to the liquor store to buy more champagne, leaving me alone with my daughter for the first time since the fire. The air in the room was heavy, suffocating, filled with the unspoken truths that had been piling up like dry tinder between us. Tasha stood by the kitchen island, her back to me. She was gripping the edge of the granite counter so hard her knuckles were white. She was pouring another glass of wine, but her hand was shaking so badly the red liquid splashed onto the marble, looking disturbingly like drops of fresh blood. I sat on the beige sofa, the dog hair clinging to my sweatpants. For a moment I just watched her. I watched the little girl I had raised, the woman I had walked down the aisle, the person I had loved more than my own life. I looked for a sign of the daughter who used to cry when she found a wounded bird in the backyard. I looked for the moral compass I thought I had instilled in her, but all I saw was a stranger in a silk blouse drowning in fear and complicity. "Tasha," I said. My voice was not the wavering, confused rasp of the senile old man I had played for the insurance adjuster. It was clear. It was deep. It was the voice of Lucius King, the father. She froze. The bottle clinked against the glass. She didn't turn around. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice tight. "Do not start. Braden will be back in 20 minutes. Just rest. You had a big day." I stood up. My knees popped, but I walked steadily across the room. I stopped 5 feet behind her. "Stop acting, Tasha," I said. "Braden isn't here. You do not have to pretend I am losing my mind. We both know exactly what happened last night." She spun around, then her eyes wide behind her smeared mascara. She looked terrified, not of me, but of the reality I was forcing her to face. "I do not know what you are talking about," she stammered, taking a step back. "You left the heater on. The adjuster said so. It was an accident." I took a step closer. "The heater," I asked. "The heater that hasn't been in my house for 10 years. The heater Braden invented this morning." I looked her dead in the eye. "He cut the support beams, Tasha. He disabled the fire suppression system. He put a timer on an incendiary device in the basement. He didn't just want the house to burn. He wanted the roof to collapse on top of me while I slept." Tasha's face crumbled. She dropped the wine glass. It shattered on the floor, shards of crystal scattering across the hardwood. She didn't even flinch. "He didn't mean to hurt you," she screamed, the denial tearing out of her throat. "He knew you would wake up. He knew you were a light sleeper. He just wanted the house. Dad, he just needed the money." She collapsed onto the floor right there in the puddle of wine and glass, sobbing with a raw, ugly intensity. It was the sound of a woman who had been holding her breath for years. "Why, Tasha?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "Why would you let him do this? Why would you stand there on the driveway and watch me stumble out of the smoke and not call for help? I paid for your college. I paid for your wedding. I bought this condo. What did I ever do to deserve this? She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears and snot. And then the truth came pouring out, ugly and undeniable. It is the money, Dad. It is the debt. She crawled toward me, grabbing the hem of my dirty sweatpants. Braden messed up. He got involved with some bad people. Investment sharks. The kind of people who don't sue you, they break your legs. He owes them $2 million, Dad. $2 million. I stared at her. $2 million. My son-in-law had gambled away a fortune I hadn't even given him yet. They gave him a deadline. She sobbed. Friday. If he doesn't pay by Friday, they are going to kill him. And not just him. They said they would come for me. They said they would hurt us. We were desperate, Dad. We didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, I said coldly. You could have come to me. You could have told me the truth. And what would you have done? She shot back a flash of anger cutting through her fear. You would have lectured him. You would have told him he was irresponsible. You would have refused to pay it, just like you refused the loan for his business last month. You are so self-righteous, Dad. You sit on your millions and judge us for trying to make something of ourselves. Trying to make something, I asked, incredulous. By gambling. By borrowing from loan sharks. He was trying to build an empire like you did, she screamed. But he failed. And now we are drowning. She grabbed my hand, squeezing it with frantic strength. Please, Daddy, you have to understand. We needed the insurance money. It is $5 million. That pays off the debt. It saves our lives. And there is enough left over for us to start over. To move away. To be happy. I looked at her hand on mine. It felt cold. So you traded my life for his debt, I said. No, she cried. We knew you would get out. We knew you were smart. And if I hadn't, I asked. If the smoke had been thicker, if the beam had fallen 2 minutes earlier, she didn't answer. She just cried harder. And now I asked. Now you want me to go to a state nursing home. You want me to sign over my power of attorney. You want me to be declared incompetent so you can take the check. Tasha looked up at me. Her eyes were pleading, desperate and completely devoid of shame. Dad, look at you, she whispered. You are 70 years old. You have lived your life. You had your career, you had Mom, you had your big house, you had everything. She took a breath, and then she said the words that severed the last thread connecting us. What do you need $5 million for? I felt the air leave the room. You are old, she continued, her voice gaining a sick kind of logic. You don't travel, you don't spend money, you just sit in that big empty house with your memories. Braden and I, we have our whole lives ahead of us. We can use that money. We can build a family. We can be happy. She stood up, wiping her face. It is a sacrifice, Dad. That is what parents do. Right? They sacrifice for their children. If you go to the home, if you just let us have this, you are saving us. You are saving my life. Isn't that worth it? Isn't my life worth more to you than a bank account? I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the selfishness etched into her features. I saw the entitlement that I had perhaps nurtured by giving her too much too soon. She didn't see me as a person. She didn't see me as her father. She saw me as a resource, an asset to be liquidated to cover her husband's mistakes. She genuinely believed that because I was old, my life had no value. She believed that her need for luxury and safety outweighed my right to exist with dignity. In that moment, my daughter died. The Tasha I knew, the little girl in pigtails, vanished. In her place stood a woman who would step over my corpse to get to a check. My heart broke. It shattered into a million pieces, sharper than the glass on the floor. But as it broke, something else hardened. The steel in my spine, the iron in my will. I realized that saving her wasn't about giving her money. Saving her would have required teaching her consequences 20 years ago. It was too late for that now. Now all I could do was teach her the hardest lesson of all. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump. I let the light fade from my eyes. I put the mask of the defeated old man back on. You are right, Tasha, I whispered. Her eyes lit up. Hope, cruel and bright, washed over her face. Yes, I said. I am old. I had my time. I don't need the money. I just want you to be safe. Oh, Daddy, she cried, throwing her arms around me. She hugged me tight, smelling of expensive perfume and betrayal. Thank you, thank you. I knew you would understand. I knew you loved me. She pulled back, smiling through her tears. Braden will be so happy. We will take care of you, I promise. We will visit you at the home every Sunday. We will bring you cookies. You won't even notice the money is gone. Every Sunday. Another lie. Once they had the money, I would never see them again. I would rot in that facility until I died, another forgotten number. Okay, I said. When do I sign? Tomorrow, she said eagerly. Braden is setting it up. We go to the insurance office, pick up the check, and you sign the release. Then we are free. Free, I repeated. The front door unlocked. Braden walked in holding a bottle of Dom Perignon and a bag of takeout. He looked at the shattered wine glass on the floor. He looked at Tasha's tear-stained face. What happened? He asked, suspicious. Everything is fine, baby, Tasha said, running to him and kissing his cheek. Dad? Dad agreed. He understands. He is going to sign. Braden looked at me over her shoulder. He smiled. It was the smile of a predator who sees the prey expose its throat. Good, Braden said. Smart move, Lucius. I knew you would see reason. He popped the cork on the champagne. It flew across the room and hit the wall. To family, Braden toasted, raising the bottle. And to new beginnings. I watched them drink. I watched them celebrate my demise. I walked back to the sofa and sat down among the dog hair. I didn't drink. I didn't smile. I just waited. They thought I had agreed to save them. They thought I was the sacrificial lamb. But they didn't know that when a structural engineer agrees to a demolition, he doesn't just knock down a wall. He brings the whole building down. And he makes sure that when it falls exactly where he wants it to. I closed my eyes and pictured the insurance office. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day, and for the first time since the fire I slept, because I knew exactly what I was going to do. The restaurant Braden chose for our little celebration was called the Obsidian Room. It was the kind of place where the lighting was too dim, the music was too loud, and the steaks cost more than the weekly grocery budget of a family of 4. It was a place designed for people who wanted to be seen, not for people who wanted to eat. And tonight, Braden Cole wanted to be seen. He walked in like he owned the joint chest, puffed out, guiding Tasha with a possessive hand on her lower back. Tasha was wearing a black dress that she had bought on credit 3 months ago, looking pale and ghostly under the recessed lighting. And then there was me, trailing behind them like a stray dog they had forgotten to leave outside. I was still wearing the oversized gray sweatpants and the stained Myrtle Beach t-shirt from the Goodwill bag. I had tried to put on a jacket Braden lent me, but it was 2 sizes too small and smelled of his cologne, a scent that now triggered a gag reflex in the back of my throat. The hostess, a young woman with a clipboard and a look of practiced boredom, scanned our group. Her eyes lingered on me for a fraction of a second too long. She saw the mismatched clothes. She saw the soot that I still hadn't managed to scrub out of my fingernails. She saw a homeless man crashing a black tie event. Table for Cole, Braden announced loud enough for the people at the bar to turn their heads. Party of 8. We are celebrating. Celebrating, I thought. My house was a smoking crater. My life's work was ash. And he was celebrating. We were led to a large circular booth in the center of the room. But as the guests began to arrive, Braden's entourage of real estate failures and investment bros, it became clear there wasn't enough room. Braden made a show of counting seats, tapping his chin theatrically. Oh, shoot, he said, looking at me with mock sympathy. We are 1 chair short at the main table, Lucius. He snapped his finger at a waiter. Hey, grab a folding chair and put it over there, by the pillar. He pointed to a spot 5 feet away from the booth, right next to the swinging door of the kitchen. It was in the shadows, cut off from the group, isolated like a dunce corner in a classroom. You will be more comfortable there, Dad, Braden said, patting my shoulder. Less noise. You know how you get with loud noises lately. The dementia makes you jumpy. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I shuffled over to the folding chair and sat down. From my vantage point, I could see them, but I wasn't part of them. I was an observer, a structural engineer inspecting a building that was about to collapse. The guests arrived. There was Tony, a man with too much hair gel and a watch that was definitely fake. There was Jessica, a real estate agent who laughed at everything Braden said with a shrill, piercing sound. They ordered bottles of champagne. They ordered seafood towers. They ordered steaks that sizzled on hot stones. When the waiter came to me, Braden waved him off. He will have the soup, Braden shouted across the gap. The potato leek. And make it lukewarm. He burns his tongue easily. And just water to drink. He is on medication. The waiter looked at me. I just nodded, staring at the tablecloth. I sat there sipping tepid potato water, watching them feast on my future. Braden was in his element. He was holding court, pouring champagne, his face flushed with the intoxication of imminent wealth. "So Braden," Tony asked, leaning in and grabbing a lobster tail. "I heard about the fire. Tragedy, man. Total tragedy." Braden sighed, putting on his tragic mask. "It is, Tony. It really is. Lucius here." He pointed his fork at me without looking. He left a heater on. Old wiring. Whole place went up like a matchbox. We are devastated. He took a sip of wine, then grinned. But you know what they say. When one door closes, a vault opens. The table laughed. Tasha looked down at her plate, pushing a piece of lettuce around with her fork. "We are looking at a complete payout." Braden continued, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper that I could hear perfectly clearly. 5 million, plus contents. We are going to clear the debts, obviously. And then comes the upgrade. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through photos. "Check this out," he said, shoving the screen in Tony's face. "It is a 50-footer. The Sea Wolf. 3 cabins, full galley, twin engines. I am putting a deposit down on Monday." "A yacht," Jessica squealed. "Braden, that is amazing." "We deserve it," Braden said, leaning back and putting his hands behind his head. "We have been taking care of the old man for years. It has been a burden, honestly. The medical bills, the confusion, it is exhausting. This money, it is basically back pay for being saints." He looked over at me. I was scraping the bottom of my soup bowl. "Look at him," Braden sneered. "He is shaking. He probably thinks he is in a cafeteria. He is expired inventory, guys. The engine is shot. The chassis is rusted. We are just waiting for the scrapyard to come pick him up." Tony laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "You are a good man, Braden. Keeping him around. I would have put him in a home years ago." "Oh, he is going," Braden said. "Tomorrow. State facility. It is better for everyone. He won't even know the difference. As long as they have pudding, he is happy." I felt a vibration against my thigh. It wasn't a tremor of age. It was the burner phone Miller had bought me, hidden deep in the pocket of my oversized sweatpants. I slowly moved my hand under the table. I kept my eyes on Braden, watching him toast to his new boat, to his new life, to my death. I slipped the phone out, shielding the screen with my other hand. One new message. Sender Dante. My heart hammered against my ribs, a rhythmic thud that drowned out the restaurant noise. I tapped the screen. The text was short, brutal, and beautiful. Got him. Clerk at the hardware store on 5th recognized the photo. Confirmed Braden bought 3 torque timers and a canister of accelerant last Tuesday. We have the receipt, and we have the security footage of him paying cash. I read it twice. We have the footage. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The air in the room suddenly felt lighter. The soup didn't taste like humiliation anymore. It tasted like fuel. Braden wasn't just a liar. He was a recorded criminal. He had walked into a store, his face exposed, and bought the murder weapon 3 days before the crime. He was sloppy. He was arrogant. He was so convinced of his own genius that he hadn't even bothered to drive to the next town. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. I looked up. Braden was looking at me. He raised his glass in a mock salute. "How is the soup, Dad?" he called out. "Try not to dribble on the shirt. I plan on donating it back to Goodwill when you are done." The table erupted in laughter again. Even Tasha cracked a small, nervous smile, desperate to fit in with the winners. I looked at Braden. I didn't look away. For the first time all night, I didn't drop my gaze to the floor. I locked eyes with him. I stared right into his pupils, channeling 40 years of engineering precision. I looked at him the way a demolition expert looks at a condemned building just before pressing the plunger. "It is delicious, Braden," I said. My voice was steady. It carried across the room, cutting through the laughter. "It tastes like justice." Braden frowned. He lowered his glass. "What did you say?" I said. "It tastes like justice," I repeated, smiling a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Or maybe just victory." Braden blinked. He looked confused. For a second, the mask slipped. He saw something in my face that he hadn't seen before. He saw clarity. But then the alcohol kicked back in. He shook his head, laughing it off. "See," he said to Tony. "Totally gone. Hearing things, tasting justice in potato soup. The mind is a terrible thing to waste. He turned back to his friends, dismissing me. He went back to talking about the yacht. He went back to spending my money. I sat back in my folding chair. I watched him. Enjoy the champagne, Braden, I thought. Enjoy the steak. Enjoy the laughter. Because this is the last meal you will ever eat as a free man. Dante had the footage. The trap was set. The structural beams of Braden's lie had just been severed. All that was left now was gravity. I signaled the waiter for the check. Not for me. For them. I wanted them to finish. I wanted them to go home. I wanted Braden to sleep one last night in his bed dreaming of oceans he would never sail. Because tomorrow at the insurance office he wasn't going to get a check. He was going to get a reality check, and I was going to be the one to cash it. The morning sun hit the windshield of Braden's leased BMW, but inside the car the air was cold enough to freeze water. I was sitting in the back seat dressed in the same oversized gray sweatpants and the Myrtle Beach t-shirt that smelled of someone else's summer vacation. I looked like a vagrant being transported to a holding cell. In the front seat, Braden was tapping his fingers on the steering wheel, humming along to a pop song, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds to check on his prisoner. We were not going to the nursing home, not yet. We had one stop to make first. The law offices of Stone and Gables. "Do not mess this up, Lucius," Braden said, catching my eye in the mirror. His voice was light, almost cheerful, the way you talk to a child before a dentist appointment. "We are just going to sign some papers. Standard stuff. Just to make sure the insurance money gets into the right account so we can take care of you." I looked out the window. Standard stuff. He meant an irrevocable power of attorney. He meant a document that would give him total control over every asset, every bank account, and every insurance payout attached to my name. He was driving me to my own execution, and he expected me to hold the axe. I did not answer him. I just stared at the passing city, my hand deep in my pocket clutching a pen. It looked like a standard cheap blue ballpoint pen, the kind you buy in a pack of 10 for $2. But it was not standard. I have been an engineer for 40 years, but I have been a tinkerer for 70. My basement workshop, the one Braden had torched, was filled with gadgets and experiments. I loved chemistry almost as much as I loved physics, and this pen I had modified the ink cartridge myself years ago, mostly to play pranks on my poker buddies, but also because I was fascinated by the chemistry of pH indicators. The ink was based on thymolphthalein. When it comes out of the pen, it is a deep, rich blue because of the high pH base I mixed it with. It looks permanent. It smells like ink. But as soon as it hits the paper, it starts reacting with the carbon dioxide in the air. The pH drops. And as the pH drops, the color fades. In 24 hours, the signature I was about to write would be invisible. The paper would be blank. And Braden's legal claim to my $5 million would be nothing but a ghost. We pulled up to a glass skyscraper downtown. Braden parked in the loading zone, not caring about the ticket. He hauled me out of the car, gripping my elbow tight. "Walk straight," he hissed. "Do not drool. And for God's sake, do not talk unless they ask you your name." We took the elevator to the 42nd floor. The doors opened onto a lobby that smelled of mahogany and expensive lies. A receptionist with a headset smiled at Braden and looked right through me. "Mr. Cole," she said. "Mr. Stone is expecting you in the conference room." We walked down a long hallway lined with abstract art. Braden pushed open a heavy oak door. Inside, sitting at the head of a table long enough to land a plane on, was Mr. Stone. He was a small man with a shark smile and a suit that cost more than my first car. "Ah," the happy family, Stone said, standing up but not offering a hand. "Let's make this quick. I have a tea time at 1. He slid a thick document across the polished wood table. "This is the general power of attorney and asset transfer agreement," Stone explained, looking only at Braden. "It grants Mr. Braden Cole full legal authority over Mr. Lucius King's financial, medical, and property affairs. Effective immediately upon signature." Braden picked up the document. He scanned it, his eyes lighting up as he read the clauses that stripped me of my rights. "Perfect," Braden said. "Where does he sign?" Stone pointed to a line at the bottom of the last page marked with a red sticky tab. "Right there. And have him initial the bottom of each page." Braden pulled out a chair for me. "Sit, Dad." I sat. The chair was soft leather swallowing my thin frame. I looked at the document. I looked at the words, "Total Asset Liquidation." Braden pulled a heavy gold-plated fountain pen from his pocket. He uncapped it and handed it to me. "Here," he said, "use this. Make it legible." I took the gold pen. My hand was trembling. Not from age, but from the adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was the pivot point. This was the moment where the beam either holds or snaps. I brought the pen to the paper. Then I let my hand spasm. "Oops," I mumbled. The gold pen flew out of my fingers. It hit the table, rolled off the edge, and clattered onto the floor under the table. "Oh, for God's sake," Braden snapped. He bent down to retrieve it. Stone sighed, checking his Rolex. While Braden's head was under the table, I moved fast. My hand dipped into my sweatpants pocket. I palmed the gold pen as Braden reached for it and simultaneously swapped it with my cheap blue ballpoint. It took less than a second. Sleight of hand, I had learned to entertain Tasha when she was 5. Braden came back up, his face red. He didn't see the gold pen in my hand. He saw a pen in my hand. He assumed I had picked it up or that he had missed it. He was too impatient, too focused on the money to look closely at the plastic barrel. "Just sign the damn paper," Lucius Braden growled. I leaned over the document. I pressed the tip of my modified pen to the paper. The blue ink flowed smoothly. Lucius, Washington, King. I wrote it slowly with a shaky hand, adding a little loop to the G just like I always did. It looked perfect, dark, authoritative, binding. I initialed the other pages. Every stroke of the pen was a ticking time bomb. "There," I said, dropping the pen onto the table. It rolled toward Braden. He snatched up the document before the ink was even dry. He blew on the signature. He looked at it with a hunger that was disgusting to witness. "Done," Braden said, his voice trembling with triumph. "It is done." Stone took the paper. He glanced at the signature. "Looks valid. I will have this notarized and filed with the county clerk this afternoon. The insurance company will receive a certified copy by tomorrow morning. You can pick up the check on Friday, Mr. Cole." "Friday," Braden repeated. "The magic day." He turned to me. He patted my cheek hard. "You did good, old man. You finally made yourself useful." He stood up. "Let's go. I have to drop you off before I meet the boat broker." We walked out of the office. I left my pen on the table. Let them have it. By the time anyone tried to use it again, the ink would be useless, or the signature on the contract would have already vanished into thin air. Braden drove me to a street corner 3 blocks from the nursing home intake center. He didn't even drive me to the door. "Get out here," he said, popping the locks. "I don't want to deal with the paperwork. Just walk down the block. Tell them your name. They are expecting you." I opened the door. I stepped out onto the curb. "Goodbye," Lucius Braden said. "Don't wait up." He gunned the engine and peeled away, merging into traffic, chasing his millions. He thought he had just left a senile old man on a corner to rot. I watched his taillights disappear. I stood up straighter. The slump in my shoulders vanished. The tremor in my hands stopped. I looked at my watch. It was 11 a.m. The ink would start fading in about 6 hours. By tomorrow morning, that contract would be a blank sheet of paper. When Stone went to file it, or when the insurance company tried to verify it, they would find nothing but a notary stamp on empty space. But I wasn't waiting for tomorrow. I turned and walked in the opposite direction of the nursing home. I walked with purpose. I walked with the stride of a man who had a blueprint in his head. I walked 2 blocks to the subway station. I took the blue line south. I got off at the Civic Center. I walked 3 more blocks until I stood in front of a massive brick building, the fire department headquarters. I walked up the steps. The guard at the front desk looked up, eyeing my dirty sweatpants. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, reaching for the phone to call security. "I am looking for Captain Dante," I said, my voice clear and commanding. "Tell him Lucius King is here, and tell him I have the rest of the puzzle." The guard hesitated, then dialed a number. A moment later, his eyes went wide. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." He hung up and pressed a buzzer. The heavy security door clicked open. "Go right back, Mr. King. He is waiting for you in interrogation room B." I walked through the door. The smell of the station diesel fumes, coffee, and old turnout gear hit me. It smelled like safety. It smelled like truth. Braden Cole thought he had just signed a deal with the devil to get rich. He didn't realize he had just signed his confession with disappearing ink. I walked down the hallway. Dante was standing at the end, holding a file folder. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes were burning with the same fire I felt in my gut. "Did he sign it?" Dante asked. I nodded. He signed it. And by this time tomorrow, that signature will be gone. But the fact that he coerced me, that is forever. "Let's go," Dante said, opening the door. "We have a lot of work to do before Friday." I stepped into the room. On the table was the charred timer we had found in the basement. Next to it was the USB drive with Braden's search history. And now we were going to add the final piece. I sat down. "Let's burn him down, Dante," I said. "Let's burn him down to the ground." Friday arrived with a sky the color of wet slate hanging low and heavy over the city of Chicago. It was the kind of gray that seeped into your bones, but inside Braden Cole's leased BMW, the atmosphere was electric with a manic artificial sunshine. Braden was drumming his fingers on the steering wheel to the beat of a pop song, his head bobbing, his eyes bright with the fever of a gambler who believes his luck has finally turned. Tasha sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, twisting a loose thread on her cardigan until I thought it would snap. And I sat in the back, the silent cargo, dressed in the same humiliating gray sweatpants and the stained t-shirt that had become my uniform of defeat. We were on our way to the headquarters of National Guardian Insurance. To Braden, this was a victory lap. To Tasha, it was a lifeline. To me, it was the final inspection before the demolition. Braden turned down the radio as we merged onto the highway. He looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes crinkling with a smile that didn't reach the predatory darkness behind them. "Today is the day, Lucius," he said, his voice bouncing with energy. "Big day. Huge day. You are going to be a very rich man. Well, technically, you are going to be a rich ward of the state, but let's not split hairs." He laughed at his own joke. Tasha didn't join in. "Just remember the plan." Braden continued, his tone shifting to that sharp, commanding edge he used when he was nervous. "You sit there. You nod. You sign where I point. Do not speak unless spoken to. If you start babbling about structural beams or gas lines, I swear to God I will drive you straight to the worst facility I can find. The one with the rats. Do you understand?" I met his gaze in the mirror. I let my mouth hang open slightly, giving him the vacant stare he expected. "I understand," I mumbled. "I just want to go home." Braden rolled his eyes. "We are working on it, Dad. Just get the check and you can go to your new home." We pulled up to the insurance headquarters, a monolith of glass and steel that pierced the gloomy sky. As a structural engineer, I appreciated the cantilevered entrance. It was bold. It suggested stability. It suggested that this was a fortress that protected its assets. Braden didn't see the architecture. He only saw the vault inside. We parked and walked into the lobby. The security guard checked our IDs. Braden flashed his license with a flourish. "Braden Cole," he announced. "Here to see Director Sterling. We have an appointment for a settlement disbursement." The guard checked his list. "Go right up. 45th floor." The elevator ride was silent, but the air pressure changed as we ascended, popping my ears. I watched the numbers climb. 10, 20, 30. With every floor, Braden's posture straightened. He adjusted his tie. He shot his cuffs. He was transforming into the tycoon he desperately wanted to be. Tasha, on the other hand, seemed to shrink. She knew deep down that this money was blood money. She knew she was selling her father for a clean slate. The doors opened onto a reception area that smelled of leather and intimidation. Mr. Henderson, the adjuster who had interviewed me at the apartment, was waiting for us. He didn't smile. "Mr. Cole," Henderson said, nodding. "Mr. King, please follow me." He led us down a long corridor lined with portraits of serious men in suits. We entered a conference room at the corner of the building. The view was breathtaking, a panorama of the city I had helped build. In the center of the room was a mahogany table that shone like a dark mirror. Sitting at the head of the table was a man I hadn't met. He was older, with silver hair and eyes like flint. He wore a suit that whispered power. This was Director Sterling. He stood up as we entered, but he didn't offer his hand. He gestured to the chairs. "Please sit." Braden took the seat to my right. Tasha took the left. I sat in the middle, slumping down, making myself small. Director Sterling, Braden said, leaning forward, resting his elbows on the table. "A pleasure. We appreciate you expediting this. My father-in-law, well, his condition is deteriorating. We need to get him settled." Sterling looked at Braden. Then he looked at me. His gaze lingered on my dirty clothes, my unshaven face. There was no pity in his eyes, only calculation. "We take our claims very seriously," Mr. Cole Sterling said, his voice a deep baritone. "Especially claims of this magnitude. $5 million is a significant payout." "It was a total loss," Braden said quickly, sensing a delay. "Your adjuster confirmed it. The house is ash. The contents are gone. My father-in-law has been displaced. We have the police report. We have the fire marshal's preliminary findings. Everything is in order." Sterling nodded slowly. "Yes, the paperwork seems complete." He reached into a leather folder in front of him. He pulled out a long rectangular envelope. Braden's eyes locked onto that envelope. I could hear his breathing change. It was a hungry, ragged sound. He leaned in, his hands twitching on the table. "Is that it?" Braden asked. Sterling opened the envelope. He pulled out a check. It was blue, watermarked, and beautiful. He placed it on the table face up, but he kept his hand resting firmly on top of it, covering the signature line. I looked at the check. I saw the zeros. $5 million. Braden saw it too. He let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He reached out. His hand trembled as it moved across the mahogany, reaching for the salvation of his debts, the yacht, the life he thought he deserved. "Thank you," Braden breathed. "You have no idea what this means to us." His fingers brushed the corner of the check, and then Sterling's hand clamped down. Hard. He didn't release the paper. Instead, he slid it back toward himself, away from Braden's grasping fingers. Braden blinked, confused. He looked up at Sterling. "Excuse me," Braden asked, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. "Is there a problem? I need to sign for it, right? I have the pen ready." Sterling didn't smile. He interlaced his fingers on top of the check, looking at Braden with the cold indifference of a glacier. "There is a procedural matter we need to address first," Mr. Cole, Sterling said. "Procedural?" Braden asked, his voice rising in pitch. "We did the procedure. We did the interview. I have the power of attorney. I signed it yesterday. It is filed. I am the legal representative of Lucius King." "Yes, we received the power of attorney document this morning," Sterling said. "Or rather, we received a courier envelope from your lawyer containing a sheet of paper." "Perfect," Braden said. "So hand over the check." Sterling paused. He looked at me. Then he looked back at Braden. "The issue, Mr. Cole, isn't about your authority to sign for Mr. King today. The issue is regarding the beneficiary clause of the policy itself, specifically Clause 14B. Clause 14B, Braden sputtered. "What the hell is that?" I read the policy. "It covers fire, flood, and acts of God. It also covers insurable interest and ownership transfer," Sterling said calmly. "Clause 14B states that for a payout to be released to a legal representative, the primary policyholder must be the undisputed legal owner of the property at the exact moment the incident occurred." Braden slammed his hand on the table. "He is the owner. He built the damn place. He has lived there for 30 years. Who else would own it?" Sterling opened the folder again. He pulled out a title deed, a copy of the deed Braden thought he knew. "According to our records," Sterling said, tapping the document, "Mr. King transferred the title of the property 6 months ago." Braden froze. He looked at Tasha. Tasha looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. What Braden whispered. "No, that is impossible. He didn't transfer anything. I handle his mail. I handle his bills. He would have told me." He turned to me, grabbing my arm. "Dad, did you sell the house? Did you sign something you didn't understand?" I looked at him. I kept my face blank, but inside I was grinning. I don't remember," I mumbled. Sterling cleared his throat. "He didn't sell it, Mr. Cole. He moved it." "Moved it?" Braden asked. "Moved it where?" "Into a trust," Sterling said. "A trust." Braden laughed, relief washing over him. "Okay, fine. A trust. So what? He controls the trust. I control him. It is the same thing. Just write the check to the trust and I will deposit it. I have power over his assets." Sterling shook his head. It was a small movement, but it hit Braden like a sledgehammer. "I am afraid it is not that simple, Mr. Cole. You see, the Lucius King Revocable Trust has very specific bylaws regarding catastrophic loss and beneficiary assignment." Sterling picked up another document. "The trust stipulates that in the event of the total destruction of the primary residence, the insurance proceeds are not to be dispersed to the individual nor to any family member acting as an agent." Braden's face went pale. Then who gets the money?" Sterling looked at the document. He adjusted his glasses. "If the property is destroyed, the trust automatically converts the asset value into a charitable donation. The beneficiary shifts immediately. Shifts to who?" Braden screamed, standing up. "Who gets my $5 million? Sterling looked up, his eyes locking with Braden's. "The United States Veterans Association for Structural Engineering Scholarships," Sterling read. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the blood rushing in Braden's ears. "The vets," Braden whispered. "You are giving the money to a charity." "We are following the instructions of the policyholder," Sterling said. "The check has already been cut to the organization. This check on the table. This is a copy for your records. It is non-negotiable." "No!" Braden roared. He lunged for the check on the table. He grabbed it, crumping it in his fist. "This is a mistake. He is senile. He didn't know what he was doing. I contest this. I have the power of attorney. I can revoke the trust." "You can try," Sterling said, leaning back in his chair. "But the trust was established 6 months ago, long before you claimed Mr. King lost his faculties. And the clause about the beneficiary shift. It is irrevocable in the event of a fire categorized as suspicious or total suspicious." Braden froze. "Who said it was suspicious?" "You said it was an accident." Sterling didn't answer. He just looked at the door. Braden turned to me. He grabbed my shirt, pulling me halfway out of the chair. "You did this," he screamed, spit flying into my face. "You old bat, you set this up. You moved the house." I looked at him. The act was getting harder to maintain. The rage in his eyes was murderous. "Braden, stop," Tasha cried, grabbing his arm. "You are hurting him." "I don't care," Braden yelled, shaking me. "Fix it, Lucius. Tell him to cancel the trust. Tell him you want the money. Tell him right now, or I swear to God." "Mr. Cole, unhand him," Sterling commanded, his voice sharp as a whip. Braden ignored him. He was losing $2 million. He was losing his life. He was losing everything. "Tell him," Braden screamed at me. I looked at Braden. I looked at the crumped check in his hand. I just wanted to help the veterans," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I was a veteran." "You are a corpse," Braden shouted. "You are dead." He raised his hand to strike me. He was going to hit me right there in the insurance office. He had lost all control, but the blow never landed. The door to the conference room burst open. It wasn't security. It wasn't a secretary. It was Dante. And this time he wasn't wearing a baseball cap and holding a clipboard. He was wearing his full dress uniform. The badge of the Fire Investigation Unit gleamed on his chest. Behind him were 4 police officers. Braden froze, his fist still raised in the air. Dante stepped into the room. He looked at Braden. He looked at me, Braden Cole. Dante said, his voice filling the room. "Step away from Mr. King." Braden dropped his hand. He stepped back, breathing hard. "What is this?" Braden asked, looking wild. "Who are you?" "I am the man who watched you sign a fake inspection report yesterday," Dante said. "And I am the man who is about to ruin your day." Braden looked at the door. He looked at the window. He was trapped. But he didn't know the half of it yet. He thought he was just losing the money. He had no idea he was about to lose his freedom. I sat back in my chair. I smoothed my shirt. The check was gone. The trap was sprung. And now the walls were coming down. Liar Braden screamed, his voice cracking and shredding the sterile silence of the conference room. He slammed his fist onto the mahogany table, rattling the water pitcher. "You are all liars. This is a conspiracy. You are trying to cheat me." He spun around, pointing a shaking finger at Director Sterling, then at Dante, and finally at me. He signed it. Braden roared, spit flying from his lips. "He signed the deed transfer 6 months ago. I was there. I saw the notary stamp it. He transferred the property to me, to us, to the family. I have the papers in my safe. I own that house. I own the land. I own the ashes. And that check belongs to me." He was hyperventilating now, his chest heaving beneath his designer suit. He looked wild, like an animal realizing the cage door has been welded shut. "You cannot give it to a charity," Braden yelled, grabbing the edge of the table as if he wanted to flip it over. "That is theft. That is $5 million that belongs to my wife, to my future. I will sue you. I will burn this whole company down." Tasha was sobbing quietly in her chair, her face buried in her hands, unable to look at the monster she had married or the father she had betrayed. Braden turned to me, his eyes bulging. "Tell them, old man," he shrieked. "Tell them you gave it to me. Tell them, or I swear to God I will leave you in a ditch." The room hung in a suspended state of violence. Everyone was looking at me. They were looking at the hunched, trembling figure in the dirty sweatpants. They were waiting for the confused mumble. They were waiting for the fear. But I was done with fear. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my hands on the arms of the chair. I pushed down. I did not struggle to rise. I did not groan. I did not shake. I stood up. I unfolded my frame to its full height of 6'2". I rolled my shoulders back, hearing the satisfying pop of my spine aligning. The slump vanished. The tremors ceased. The vacant, watery look in my eyes evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a man who used to stare down tornadoes for a living. I reached into the waistband of my sweatpants. I didn't pull out a tissue. I didn't pull out a pill bottle. I pulled out a blue file folder. It was thin, precise, and lethal. I tossed it onto the table. It slid across the polished wood with a hiss, stopping exactly in front of Braden's clenched fists. "You are right about one thing, Braden," I said. My voice filled the room. It wasn't the raspy whisper I had been using for 3 days. It was deep, resonant, and steady as a concrete pylon. "You were there 6 months ago," I continued. "You did see me sign a transfer document. You were so eager, so greedy, watching that pen move across the paper. You were practically salivating." Braden stared at me. He stepped back, his mouth opening and closing. The sudden change in my demeanor hit him harder than a physical blow. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Lucius," he whispered. "But you didn't read the fine print, did you?" I asked, taking a step toward him. "You never read the fine print. You just look at the bottom line. You saw the word transfer, and you stopped reading." I pointed to the blue folder. "Open it." Braden didn't move. He couldn't. He was paralyzed by the realization that the old man he had been bullying was suddenly the most dangerous person in the room. "Open it," I commanded, my voice cracking like a whip. Braden's trembling hand reached out. He flipped the folder open. Inside was a single legal document stamped with the official seal of the Cook County clerk. "Read the header," I said. Braden looked down. His eyes darted across the page. The Lucius King Revocable Living Trust." He read, his voice barely audible. "That is correct," I said, walking around the table until I was standing right next to him. "You see, Braden, I didn't transfer the house to you. I didn't transfer it to Tasha. I transferred it to the trust, an entity that I control, an entity that exists solely to protect my legacy from parasites." Braden looked up, confusion warring with panic. But I am the beneficiary. The will says. The will is, for when I die, I cut him off, and I am very much alive. But this document, this is the operating agreement for the trust, and it has a very specific clause regarding catastrophic loss. I leaned in close. I could smell the fear on him. It smelled like sour sweat and cheap cologne. "Clause 14, B, I said softly. "The bad actor clause." Braden stared at me. "The what?" I reached over and turned the page for him. I pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. "It states that in the event the property is destroyed and the destruction is found to be caused by or significantly aided by the negligence or malice of a primary beneficiary, the beneficiary status is immediately and irrevocably voided." Braden shook his head. No, that is not real. You made that up." "I am a structural engineer, Braden," I said. "I build redundancies into everything. Bridges, skyscrapers, and my estate. Did you really think I would hand over a $5 million asset to a man who can't even pay his gambling debts without trying to kill me?" I tapped the paper. "Read the rest." Braden's eyes scanned the page. I saw the color drain from his face until he looked like a corpse. The assets shall be immediately liquidated," he read, his voice choking, "and the proceeds transferred in full to the United States Veterans Association," I finished for him, "specifically the Scholarship Fund for Combat Engineers." The room was silent. Absolutely silent. $5 million, Braden. Gone. I watched the realization wash over him. It wasn't just disappointment. It was ruin. He had bet everything on this. He had burned down a mansion. He had risked prison. He had sold his soul. And for what? To write a check to a charity. "No," Braden whispered. "No, you can't do this. I have debts, Lucius. I have serious debts. They will kill me." "You should have thought about that before you cut the support beams in my living room," I said coldly. Braden looked at the check that Director Sterling was holding, the check that was now property of the Veterans Association. He looked at Tasha. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and awe. She realized for the first time that she had bet on the wrong horse. She had underestimated the old lion because he had gray hair. "You played the game, Braden," I said. "You swung for the fences. You tried to burn me out. You tried to freeze me out. You tried to erase me." I stood tall, adjusting the collar of my stained t-shirt as if it were a tuxedo. "But you forgot the first rule of engineering, son. You never apply a load to a structure until you know what holds it up. You thought I was weak because I was quiet. You thought I was stupid because I was old. I leaned in until my forehead was almost touching his. But I was just testing your stress points. And look at you now. You are buckling. Braden made a sound like a wounded animal. He lunged for the folder, trying to tear it up, trying to destroy the truth. But I was faster. I grabbed his wrist. My grip was iron. The grip of a man who had worked with steel for 50 years. I squeezed until his fingers opened and he dropped the file. It is over, Braden, I said, shoving his hand away. The money is gone. The house is gone. And your luck? That ran out the moment you handed me that plastic bag of clothes and told me good luck. Braden stumbled back, hitting the wall. He looked at Sterling. He looked at Henderson. He looked at Dante. He was looking for an ally. He was looking for a loophole. But there were no loopholes. There was only the hard, cold concrete of reality. He slid down the wall, collapsing into a heap on the floor. He put his head in his hands and began to sob. It wasn't a cry of sorrow. It was the terrified wail of a man who knows the sharks are coming and he just lost his only life raft. I looked down at him. I felt no pity. I felt no satisfaction. I just felt the grim efficiency of a job well done. The structure had been unsound. It had to come down. I turned to Director Sterling. I believe we are finished here, I said. You can mail the receipt to my new address. Sterling nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Of course, Mr. King. I looked at Tasha. She was trembling. Daddy, she whispered. What about us? I looked at her. I looked at the daughter who had stood on the driveway and watched me burn. There is no us, Tasha, I said. You made your choice. You chose the arsonist. Now you get to live in the ashes. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the door where Dante was waiting. The air in the room felt cleaner now, lighter. Braden was broken. The check was safe, and I was just getting started. The silence in the conference room shattered like a glass pane hit by a sledgehammer. Braden did not take the news of his financial ruin well. He did not slump into a chair. He did not cry. He vibrated. It was a terrifying physical manifestation of a man whose entire reality had just been deleted. His face turned a shade of purple that looked painful, the veins in his neck bulging against the collar of his expensive dress shirt like cords of rope about to snap. He looked at the check on the table, the check that was now property of the Veterans Association, and then he looked at me. In his eyes, I saw the exact moment he realized his life was over. He saw the loan sharks waiting for him. He saw the broken kneecaps. He saw the concrete shoes. And in his twisted narcissist logic, he decided that I was the cause of it all. Not his gambling, not his greed, not his arson. Me, the old man who refused to die on schedule. You old bastard, he screamed. The sound tore out of his throat, raw and animalistic. You ruined everything. You planned this. You set me up. He lunged. It happened fast, but to my engineer's eyes it moved in slow motion. I saw his weight shift to his back foot. I saw his shoulder drop. He launched himself across the mahogany table, scattering papers and spilling the water pitcher. His hands were curled into claws, reaching for my throat. He wanted to squeeze the life out of me right there in the insurance office. He didn't care about the witnesses. He didn't care about the law. He just wanted to destroy the thing that had outsmarted him. Tasha screamed. Director Sterling shouted something unintelligible and backed his chair away. I did not move. I did not flinch. I stood my ground, my feet planted shoulder-width apart, just as I had stood on construction sites while cranes swung tons of steel inches from my head. I knew something Braden didn't. I knew the structural integrity of this room was about to change. Before Braden's fingers could graze the fabric of my dirty t-shirt, the heavy double doors of the conference room exploded inward. They didn't just open. They banged against the walls with a thunderclap that shook the floorboards. Braden froze in midair, stumbling as he tried to arrest his momentum. He turned his head wild-eyed and panting. Standing in the doorway was a wall of blue. It was Dante. But it wasn't the Dante Braden had met yesterday. It wasn't Mr. Smith, the bumbling assistant with the baseball cap and the clipboard. That man was gone. In his place stood Captain Dante Washington of the City Fire Investigation Unit. He was wearing his full-dress uniform, the gold buttons gleaming under the fluorescent lights, the badge on his chest shining like a shield. He looked 10 feet tall. He looked like Judgment Day. Behind him were 4 uniformed police officers, their hands resting on their holsters, their faces grim masks of duty. "Sit down," Mr. Cole Dante boomed. His voice was deep resonant and left absolutely no room for argument. It was the voice of a man who commanded scenes of disaster for a living. Braden stumbled back, crashing into his chair. He looked at Dante. He looked at the uniform. He looked at the face he thought he recognized but couldn't place. "You," Braden whispered, his voice trembling. "You were at my house. You were the assistant. You tricked me." Dante walked into the room. He moved with a heavy, deliberate grace. He didn't look at Sterling. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes locked on Braden, pinning him to the chair with the sheer weight of his authority. "I am not an assistant," Dante said, stopping at the end of the table. "I am the lead arson investigator for this district, and for the last 48 hours you have been the subject of an active criminal investigation." Braden shook his head, a frantic, jerky motion. "Investigation number? No, it was an accident. The adjuster said so. Henderson said it was an accident. My father-in-law, he has dementia. He left the heater on." Dante reached into the pocket of his uniform jacket. He pulled out a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside was a black, melted lump of plastic and wire. It looked like trash to the untrained eye, but to Braden it must have looked like a tombstone. Dante tossed the bag onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Braden. "Do you recognize this, Braden?" Dante asked softly. Braden stared at the bag. He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. "No," he squeaked. "I don't know what that is. Just some junk from the fire." Dante leaned over the table, placing his knuckles on the wood. "This is the remains of a Torque X 500 digital timer," Dante said. "It is a heavy-duty outdoor model. Waterproof. Rugged. Usually used for garden lights or pool pumps." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We found it in the basement of Mr. King's home. Specifically, we found it inside the intake vent of the HVAC system. It was wired to a ruptured canister of accelerant." Braden looked up, sweat beading on his forehead. "So the old man probably put it there. He tinkers. He is crazy. He builds things." Dante smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. "We thought you might say that," Dante said. "That is why we checked the serial number. You see, this specific batch of timers was shipped to only 3 hardware stores in the greater Chicago area last month." Dante reached into his pocket again. He pulled out a photograph. He slammed it down next to the evidence bag. It was a still frame from a security camera. Grainy but clear enough. It showed a man standing at a checkout counter. He was wearing a designer jacket. He was looking over his shoulder nervously. And in his hand he was holding a Torque X 500 timer and a red canister of camping fuel. The timestamp on the photo was dated 3 days before the fire. The man in the photo was Braden Cole. Dante pointed a gloved finger at the photo. "That is you, Braden," Dante said, "at Miller's Hardware on 5th Street, Tuesday afternoon, 2:17 p.m. You paid cash. You thought that made you invisible, but you forgot that Miller's has 4K cameras at the register." Braden stared at the photo. He stared at his own face, caught in the act of buying the murder weapon. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't speak. The air in the room seemed to have been sucked out. "And just in case you want to claim it was for your garden," Dante continued, twisting the knife, "we also recovered your laptop search history. The one where you Googled how to create a delayed ignition source using this exact model of timer." Dante stood up straight, crossing his arms over his chest. "You didn't just set a fire, son. You built a bomb. You rigged a timed incendiary device to pump toxic smoke into a sleeping man's bedroom. That is not negligence. That is not an accident. That is attempted first-degree murder." The words hung in the air like smoke. Attempted murder. I watched Braden. He was crumbling. The arrogant facade was gone. The confident tycoon was gone. All that was left was a scared little boy who had played with matches and burned his own life down. He looked at the door, but the police officers were blocking it. He looked at the window 45 stories up. There was nowhere to run. But the most devastating reaction didn't come from Braden. It came from Tasha. My daughter had been sitting silently on my left, watching the scene unfold with wide, horrified eyes. She had known about the debt. She had known about the insurance fraud. She had convinced herself that they were just taking advantage of a bad situation, that the fire was just a way to get money from a faceless corporation. But murder. She looked at the timer in the bag. She looked at the photo of her husband buying it. She looked at me standing there alive only because I had woken up in time. She realized in a single crushing moment of clarity that she was sleeping next to a monster. She realized that the man she loved, the man she had betrayed her father for, had planned to kill me. He hadn't just risked my life. He had engineered my death. The blood drained from her face so fast she turned the color of parchment. Her eyes rolled back in her head. Her hands went limp in her lap. "Tasha," I said, reaching out. She didn't hear me. Her body simply gave up. She slumped sideways in her chair, sliding off the leather seat like water. She hit the floor with a sickening thud, her head bouncing once against the carpet. Tasha Braden yelled, but he didn't move to help her. He was too paralyzed by his own fear. I moved. I dropped to my knees beside her. I checked her pulse. It was thready fast. She had fainted from the sheer psychological shock of the truth. One of the police officers stepped forward, calling for a medic on his radio. I looked up at Dante. I looked at Braden, who was staring at his unconscious wife with a look of utter detachment. He didn't care that she was hurt. He only cared that his alibi had just collapsed. "Get him out of here," I growled at Dante. "Get him out of my sight before I finish what the fire started." Dante nodded to the officers. Two of them moved in on Braden. Braden Cole. Dante announced, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. "You are under arrest for arson, insurance fraud, and the attempted murder of Lucius King." They grabbed Braden's arms. He didn't fight. He went limp, his legs dragging as they hauled him out of the chair. He looked at me one last time as they dragged him past the table. His eyes were dead, empty. "You tricked me," he whispered. "You old devil, you tricked me." I stood up, dusting off my knees. I looked at him with the cold indifference of a judge passing sentence. "I didn't trick you, Braden," I said. "I just let you be yourself." The officers dragged him out. The door slammed shut. The room was quiet, save for the sound of Tasha's shallow breathing on the floor. I looked at Dante. He gave me a slow, solemn nod. "It is done," Lou Dante said. "He is gone." I looked at the check on the table. I looked at my daughter on the floor. I looked at the city skyline outside the window. "Yes," I said, "it is done, but the cleanup is just beginning." The conference room was silent except for the metallic click of handcuffs and the heavy breathing of a man who realized the walls were closing in. Braden sat in the chair where the police had shoved him, his hands bound behind his back, his face a mask of sweaty desperation. He looked at the evidence bag containing the melted timer. Then he looked at the photograph of himself at the hardware store. "It is circumstantial," Braden stammered, his voice rising in pitch. "So I bought a timer. So what? Millions of people buy timers. That proves nothing. You found a melted lump of plastic in a basement full of debris. You cannot prove I put it there. You cannot prove I started that fire. Any decent lawyer will tear this apart in court." He looked around the room, his eyes wild, seeking a lifeline. "My father-in-law has dementia," Braden shouted, pointing his chin at me. "He probably found the timer in the garage and played with it. He likes gadgets. He is confused. This is all just a terrible coincidence. You have no direct evidence. You have no witnesses." I sat there watching him flail. It was pathetic. It was the frantic splashing of a man drowning in deep water, not realizing that the weight dragging him down was tied to his own ankle. Dante looked at me. He raised an eyebrow. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "You are right, Braden," I said, my voice cutting through his panic like a laser through steel. "A timer is just a piece of hardware, and a receipt is just a piece of paper. In a court of law, a good defense attorney might be able to create reasonable doubt. They might argue that I was senile. They might argue that the evidence was contaminated." I stood up slowly and walked toward the large flat-screen monitor mounted on the wall at the end of the conference room. "But you forgot who you were dealing with," I continued. "You forgot that before I retired, I didn't just design houses. I designed secure facilities for government contractors. I designed data centers that could survive a nuclear event. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small ruggedized hard drive. It was encased in orange rubber, heavy and dense." Braden frowned. "What is that?" "When I built my home," I said, turning the drive over in my hands, "I treated it like an aircraft. You know what an aircraft has, Braden? It has a flight data recorder. A black box." Braden's face went pale. "I installed a server room in the sub-basement," I explained. "It is encased in 2 feet of reinforced concrete and lined with lead. It has its own independent power supply and a halon fire suppression system that is separate from the main house. It is designed to withstand temperatures of up to 3,000 degrees for 4 hours. I walked over to the laptop connected to the screen and plugged the drive in. "You cut the wires to the house cameras, Braden. I know you did. I found the snipped cables. You thought that by disabling the cloud upload you were invisible." I tapped a few keys on the laptop. The screen flickered to life. But you didn't know that the cameras were hardwired to the black box. They record locally, every second, every frame, even when the internet is down, even when the power is cut. As long as the lenses aren't melted, they see everything. I hit the space bar. The massive screen on the wall illuminated the dim conference room. It was a high-definition night vision feed. The timestamp in the corner read October 14th, 3:12 a.m. The angle was from the ceiling of the utility room in the basement. The room was dark, but the infrared camera turned everything into shades of ghostly green and gray. In the center of the frame, a figure was moving. He was wearing a dark hoodie, but the hood had fallen back. His face was clearly visible. It was Braden. The room gasped. Even the police officers leaned in. On the screen, Braden was kneeling next to the main gas intake pipe. He wasn't confused, he wasn't panicking, he was working with methodical, chilling precision. In his hand, he held a heavy wrench and a pair of bolt cutters. We watched in silence as the Braden on the screen wrenched the safety valve open. We watched him use the bolt cutters to snap the padlock on the fire suppression system, the lock I had shown Dante earlier. Then the on-screen Braden did something that made Director Sterling look away in disgust. He stood up. He wiped his hands on his pants. He looked directly at the main gas line he had just sabotaged, and he smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile. It was a greedy, shark-like grin. He spoke. The audio from the camera was crisp, picking up the hiss of the leaking gas and the sound of his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Burn, baby, burn," the digital Braden whispered. "Daddy needs a new yacht. Turn into cash, you old pile of bricks." I paused the video. The image of Braden's smiling face, frozen in the act of destroying my life for a boat, hung over the room. I turned to the real Braden. He was slumped in his chair, his skin the color of old ash. He was staring at the screen, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The arrogance was gone. The bluster was gone. He looked small. He looked broken. That, I said, pointing to the screen, is not circumstantial. That is not hearsay. That is a high-definition confession. Dante stepped forward. He looked at the officers. "You have seen enough," Dante said. The lead officer nodded grimly. He walked over to Braden and hauled him up by the arm. Braden didn't fight. He didn't argue. His legs were like jelly. "Braden Cole," the officer said, reciting the words with mechanical efficiency. "You are under arrest for first-degree arson, insurance fraud, criminal damage to property." The officer paused. He looked at me. He looked at the video where Braden had sabotaged the safety systems, knowing full well I was asleep upstairs, and the officer added his voice, hardening attempted murder in the first degree. "Attempted murder," Braden whispered. The reality of the words hit him. No, I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted the money. I knew he would wake up. I knew he was a light sleeper. "You disabled the smoke detectors," Dante said, cutting him off. "You cut the fire suppression system. You rigged the HVAC to pump smoke into his room. You created a death trap, son. You didn't give him a chance. You wanted him dead so you wouldn't have to share the payout. That is premeditated. That is malice aforethought." Braden looked at Tasha. She was still on the floor, groggy, just starting to stir as the medic attended to her. She looked up, her eyes unfocused, and saw the frozen image of her husband on the screen. She saw the smile. She let out a low moan of pure heartbreak and turned her face away, curling into a ball. Tasha Braden screamed, struggling against the cuffs. Tell them we needed the money. Tell them about the loan sharks. They made me do it." I walked over to him. I stood inches from his face. "The loan sharks didn't make you smile, Braden," I said softly. "The loan sharks didn't make you say my home should turn into cash. That was you. That was your soul, or what is left of it." I leaned in closer. "You said I deserved to burn. You said I was worth more dead than alive. But look at the math now. I am alive. I am standing here. And you are a liability that is about to be written off." Braden started to cry. Ugly, heaving sobs that shook his whole body. "Please, Lucius. Please. I am family. Don't let them take me. I will pay it back. I will work. I will do anything." "You are not family," I said. "You are a structural failure. And we tear those down." I nodded to the officers. "Get him out of here." They dragged him toward the door. He was dead weight, his heels dragging on the carpet, screaming my name, screaming Tasha's name, screaming for mercy he had never shown me. The elevator doors opened. They shoved him inside. The doors closed, cutting off his wails. The conference room was quiet again. Director Sterling picked up the check, the copy he had taunted Braden with. He tore it in half. Mr. King Sterling said, his voice respectful, "I apologize that it came to this, but your foresight, it is remarkable." I looked at the blank screen where Braden's face had been. "It wasn't foresight, Director," I said wearily. "It was just engineering. When you build something you love, you protect it. And when you invite a snake into your garden, you make sure you have a shovel ready." I looked down at Tasha. The medic was helping her sit up. She looked at me, her eyes filled with fear and confusion. She had lost her husband. She had lost the money. She had lost the house. And she was about to find out that she had lost her father too. Dante put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, Lou?" I took a deep breath. I felt the weight of the last 3 days lifting off my chest. "I am fine, Dante," I said. "The fire is out. Now we just have to clear the debris." As the police officers hauled Braden toward the heavy oak doors of the conference room, the reality of his situation finally pierced through the adrenaline and the denial. It wasn't just the handcuffs. It wasn't just the prospect of a prison cell or the humiliation of being paraded through the lobby of an insurance company in front of the people he had tried to defraud. It was something far more primal, something that turned his face from a pale gray to a ghostly white. He remembered Tony. He remembered the phone call at 3 a.m. He remembered the voice that sounded like gravel grinding in a cement mixer. He remembered the deadline. Friday. Today was Friday. And Tony was not a man who accepted excuses, certainly not excuses involving failed arson plots and police custody. "Wait!" Braden screamed, planting his feet and trying to dig his heels into the plush carpet. "You can't take me. You don't understand." The officers didn't stop. They gripped his arms tighter, their faces impassive masks of state authority. To them, he was just another white-collar criminal trying to stall the inevitable booking process. "Please," Braden shrieked, his voice cracking into a desperate falsetto. "You can't put me in general population. You can't put me in the system. If I go inside, I am a dead man." He twisted his body, looking back at me with eyes that were bulging out of his head. "Lucius, tell them about the debt. Tell them about Tony. If they process me, Tony finds out. He has guys inside. They will shank me in the shower. They will kill me before my first hearing." I stood by the mahogany table watching him struggle. I adjusted the cuffs of my dirty shirt. I looked at Dante. I gave a small nod. "Hold on a moment, officers," I said. My voice was calm, low, and carried the weight of the entire room. The officers stopped. They didn't let go of Braden, but they paused, looking at me. They respected Dante, and Dante respected me, so they waited. Braden sagged in their grip, panting sweat dripping from his nose. He looked at me with a pathetic glimmer of hope. He thought I was going to intervene. He thought that despite everything, despite the fire, despite the betrayal, I was still the soft-hearted old man who had paid for his wedding. He thought I was going to save him from the wolves because that is what I had always done. Lucius Braden gasped, "Thank God. You have to help me. You know what these people are like. You know what they do to Welchers. If I go to jail owing them $2 million, I am meat. I am dead meat. You have to pay them off. Please. Use the check. Use the insurance money. Pay Tony and I will disappear. I swear. I will never bother you again. Just save my life." I walked toward him slowly. I stopped about 2 feet away, close enough to smell the fear radiating off him. It smelled sour, like spoiled milk. I looked him up and down. "You are worried about your creditors, Braden?" I asked softly. Yes, Braden nodded frantically. "They are animals, Lucius. They will kill me for the principle of it." I reached into the back pocket of my sweatpants. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a check. It wasn't a legal document from a high-rise firm. It was a receipt. A simple carbon copy receipt from a coffee shop on the south side with some handwritten notes on the back. I unfolded it. "You are right, Braden," I said. "Tony is a very serious businessman. I met with him this morning." Braden froze. You met with Tony?" "I did," I said. "While you were driving me here thinking you were taking me to the slaughter, I had already made a stop. I met him at that little bakery on 4th Street, the one where they make the cannoli you like." I smoothed the paper out. I explained the situation to Mr. Tony, I continued. I told him that his borrower, Mr. Braden Cole, was about to be arrested for arson and attempted murder. I told him that the insurance payout you promised him was a fantasy. I told him that you were going to federal prison for a minimum of 20 years. Braden's eyes widened. You told him? Why would you do that? He will kill me. I raised a hand to silence him. I spoke to him as a businessman, Braden. I explained to him that a dead man cannot pay debts, and a man in prison with zero assets cannot pay $2 million. To Tony, you are what we in the engineering world call a structural liability. You are a bad asset. You are a write-off. I took a step closer. So I made him an offer. Braden stopped breathing. An offer I offered to buy your debt, I said. Braden blinked. He looked confused. Then slowly a look of immense relief washed over his face. His knees buckled and the officers had to hold him up. You bought it, he whispered. You paid him off. Oh my God. Oh my God, Lucius. Thank you. I knew it. I knew you wouldn't let them hurt me. You paid the $2 million. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that echoed off the glass walls. $2 million, I asked. Braden, do not be ridiculous. I am a value investor. I don't pay retail for damaged goods. I held up the receipt. Tony knew he was never going to see that money. He knew you were going away. He knew getting a dime from you would cost him more in legal fees and hitmen than it was worth. So he cut his losses. He sold me the note. He sold me your entire debt, the full $2 million plus interest for pennies on the dollar. I crumpled the receipt in my fist. I paid him $50,000, Braden. That is all you are worth to the underworld. 50 grand. And in exchange, he transferred the ownership of the debt to me. He signed it over. Legally. Braden stared at me, his mouth hung open. So I don't owe Tony anymore. No, I said. Tony is out of the picture. He has his 50 grand. He is happy. He has forgotten your name. You are safe from the mob, Braden. No one is going to shank you in the shower for Tony. Braden slumped, letting out a sob of relief. Thank you. Thank you, Lucius. I knew you were family. I leaned in until my face was inches from his. I lowered my voice to a whisper that sounded like a tectonic plate shifting. You are not listening, Braden. I didn't pay the debt for you. I bought the debt. I paused to let the words sink in. That means you don't owe Tony. You owe me. Braden's eyes snapped back to mine. The relief evaporated, replaced by a new, colder kind of terror. What I am your creditor now, Braden, I said. I hold the note. I hold the judgment. And unlike Tony, I am not interested in breaking your legs. I am interested in your time. I pointed to the door. You are going to prison, son, for a long time. And while you are in there, you are going to work. Work, Braden stammered. Yes, I said. Federal prisons have work programs. They have laundry duty. They have license plate stamping. They have kitchen detail. And do you know how much they pay? I smiled. A cold shark-like smile. About 12 to 40 cents an hour. I did the mental math, looking up at the ceiling. Let's be generous and say you make 40 cents an hour. That is roughly $800 a year. I looked back at him. I have filed a garnishment order against your future earnings, Braden. Every single cent you make in that prison, every dime you earn scrubbing toilets, every penny you make mopping floors. It comes to me. It goes to pay down the interest on your $2 million debt. Braden shook his head. No, you can't do that. I can, I said, and I will. I will make sure that for the next 20, 30, or 40 years you never keep a single dollar. You will never buy a candy bar at the commissary. You will never buy an extra bar of soap. You will work every single day until your hands bleed, and you will send every paycheck to the man you tried to burn alive. I grabbed the lapels of his suit jacket, the jacket he had bought with my money. You wanted to live off me, I asked. You wanted a free ride. Well, now you are going to work for me. You are my indentured servant, Braden. You belong to me. Braden looked at me with pure horror. He realized then that I hadn't saved him. I had enslaved him. I had sentenced him to a life of labor where he would never see a reward. No, he screamed, struggling against the officers again. No, let Tony kill me. Let him kill me. I don't want to work for you. I don't want to be your slave. It is too late, I said, stepping back. The deal is signed. The ink is dry. And unlike your signature, mine doesn't disappear. I nodded to the officers. Take him away. He has a shift starting in the laundry room, and I hate it when my employees are late. No, Braden howled as they dragged him backward. Lucius, please just let me die. Just let me die. His screams echoed down the hallway, bouncing off the portraits of the serious men in suits. He was dragged into the elevator, kicking and crying, a man who had tried to steal a fortune and ended up owing his soul to the victim. The doors slid shut, cutting off the noise. I stood there in the silence, adjusting my dirty t-shirt. I felt a profound sense of balance. The scales had tipped. Dante stepped up beside me. He looked at the elevator doors. "That is cold," Lou Dante said quietly. "Buying his debt, making him work it off at 40 cents an hour. That is colder than the morgue." I looked at Dante. I thought about the fire. I thought about the smoke in my lungs. I thought about Tasha standing on the driveway watching me burn. "He wanted to be a part of the family business, Dante," I said. "I just gave him an entry-level position." I turned back to the room. Tasha was still on the floor, weeping softly. "One down," I said. "One to go." The silence that followed Braden's departure was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. The heavy oak doors of the conference room had swung shut, cutting off his screams, leaving behind a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. The police officers who remained were standing by the wall, silent sentinels of the law, their faces impassive. Dante was putting his notebook away, his job done. Director Sterling was organizing the papers on the mahogany table, stacking the shredded pieces of the $5 million check into a neat little pile of confetti. And then there was Tasha. My daughter was still on the floor, curled into a fetal ball near the leg of the table. Her expensive black dress was rumpled, twisted around her legs. Her mascara had run in dark rivers down her cheeks, turning her face into a tragic mask of ruin. She was the debris left behind after the storm had passed. I stood over her. I looked down at the child I had raised. I looked for the little girl who used to sit on my drafting table and color in the blueprints with crayons. I looked for the teenager who had cried when her goldfish died. I looked for the young woman I had walked down the aisle beaming with pride. I found none of them. All I saw was a stranger who had stood on a driveway at 3:30 in the morning and watched my life burn. Tasha stirred. She let out a low moan, pushing herself up on trembling arms. She looked around the room, her eyes wide and unfocused. She saw the empty chair where Braden had been. She saw the police. And then, slowly terrified, she looked up at me. "Daddy," she whispered. Her voice was small, broken, a ghost of the entitlement she had worn just an hour ago. I did not answer. I did not offer her a hand to help her up. I just watched. She scrambled to her knees. She crawled toward me across the plush carpet, moving like a wounded animal seeking shelter. She reached out and grabbed the fabric of my dirty sweatpants, clutching the gray cotton as if it were the hem of a saint's robe. "Daddy, please," she sobbed, burying her face against my knee. "You have to help me. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he was going to do it." I looked down at the top of her head. Her hair was messy, the expensive blowout ruined by sweat and fear. "You didn't know I asked." My voice was low, flat, devoid of the warmth she was desperately seeking. "No," she cried, shaking her head against my leg. "He made me do it, Daddy Braden. He is crazy. You saw him. You saw the video. He is a monster. He told me if I didn't go along with the insurance story, he would hurt me. He said the loan sharks would come for me too. I was scared, Daddy. I was so scared." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading, trying to summon the tears that had always worked on me when she was a child. "I am a victim too," she wept. "Just like you. He manipulated us both. Please tell these men to leave me alone. Take me home, Daddy. Take me back to the condo. We can start over. Just you and me. I will take care of you. I promise." I listened to her. I listened to the lies tumbling out of her mouth, mixed with just enough truth to make them palatable. She was scared. Yes. But she wasn't a victim. I reached down. I took her hands, her cold, clammy hands, and I peeled them off my leg. I held them for a second, feeling the familiar bones, the familiar skin. Then I dropped them. "Stand up, Tasha," I said. She blinked, confused by the coldness in my tone. She struggled to her feet, swaying slightly, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Daddy," she asked, hope flickering in her eyes. "Are we going?" I reached into the pocket of the oversized jacket I was wearing. Tasha watched my hand. I could see the calculation in her eyes. She thought I was reaching for my checkbook. She thought I was reaching for a credit card. She thought I was reaching for the keys to a new life. I pulled out a small rectangular piece of paper. It was white with blue lettering. It was crinkled at the edges. I held it out to her. "Here," I said. She took it. She looked at it, her brow furrowed in confusion. A bus ticket," she whispered. "It is a one-way ticket to Cleveland," I said. "It leaves from the Greyhound station on Jefferson in 2 hours." "Cleveland," she stammered, looking up at me with horror. Why would I go to Cleveland? I live here. I have a condo. I have a life." "You have nothing, Tasha," I said. The words hit her like a physical slap. She took a step back. "What do you mean?" "The condo is in foreclosure," I said. "I stopped paying the mortgage 3 months ago when I realized Braden was stealing from me. The bank takes possession on Monday. You have 48 hours to vacate." But the insurance money," she cried. "The $5 million, you said you bought Braden's debt. You have money. You can help me." I looked at her. I looked at the daughter who had valued a payout over my pulse. "I bought Braden's debt because I wanted to own his punishment," I said. "That money was an investment in justice. But you are a different kind of investment, Tasha, a failed one." I took a step closer to her. "You said you were coerced. You said you were scared. And maybe in the beginning that was true. But fear didn't make you stand in that driveway and lie to the police. Fear didn't make you tell the adjuster I was senile. Fear didn't make you try to put me in a state nursing home so you could buy a yacht." I pointed at the door where Braden had been dragged out. "Braden was the arsonist," I said. "He lit the match. But you were the oxygen. You fed his fire. You validated his lies. You watched him cut the legs out from under your own father, and you didn't just stay silent. You handed him the saw." "No, Daddy, no!" she wailed, grabbing my arm. "I love you. I do love you. Love is action. Tasha." I roared, my voice finally breaking the calm surface. "Love is waking me up when the house is on fire. Love is telling the truth when the police arrive. Love is not selling my dignity for $5 million. I pulled my arm away from her grip. "Braden is going to prison for 20 years, I said, my voice dropping back to a lethal whisper. "He is going to pay for his crimes against the state." I looked at the bus ticket in her hand. "And you are going to pay for your crimes against this family." Tasha stared at the ticket. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. I can't go to Cleveland," she whispered. "I don't know anyone there. I have no money. I have no job. I have nothing." "Exactly," I said. I turned to Director Sterling. "Director, does the revised trust agreement have a clause regarding accomplices to the destruction of the asset?" Sterling nodded. He looked at Tasha with pity, but he respected the law. "Yes, Mr. King. Any individual found to be complicit in the fraudulent claim either through direct action or omission of truth is automatically disinherited. They are stripped of all beneficiary rights present and future." I turned back to Tasha. "You heard the man," I said. "You are out of the will, Tasha. You are out of the trust. You are out of the family." But I will go to jail," she screamed. "If I am an accomplice, arrest me. Put me with Braden. At least there I will have a bed." I shook my head. "No," I said. "That would be too easy. Prison provides 3 meals a day. Prison provides shelter. You don't deserve that kind of security." I gestured to Dante. "I spoke with the district attorney this morning," I said. "In exchange for the evidence on Braden, I made a deal. They are not going to charge you. You are free to go." "Free," she whispered, looking around the room as if it were a trap. "You are free to experience the world without my protection," I said. "You are free to find a job without my recommendation. You are free to pay rent without my checkbook. You are free to be exactly who you are, a 30-year-old woman with no skills, no loyalty, and no father." I pointed to the door. "The bus leaves at 2. I suggest you start walking. It is a long way to the station, and I don't think you can afford a cab." Tasha stood there frozen. She looked at the ticket. She looked at me. The reality of it was sinking in. She wasn't going to prison. She was going to poverty. She was going to the one place she had spent her entire life trying to avoid the bottom. "Daddy, please," she begged, her voice barely a whisper. I am your daughter. I looked at her one last time. I looked at the features that reminded me of her mother. I felt a pang of grief, sharp and deep. But I killed it. I suffocated it just like Braden had tried to suffocate me. My daughter died in the fire, I said. You are just a stranger who looks like her. I turned my back on her. Dante. Let's go, I said. I walked toward the elevator. I heard her behind me. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. It was the sound of a person realizing they were truly, utterly alone in the universe. I pressed the button. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. Dante followed me. As the doors began to slide shut, I saw her through the narrowing gap. She was standing in the middle of the boardroom, clutching that cheap bus ticket, surrounded by men in suits who were already turning away, going back to their work. She looked small. She looked terrified. The doors clicked shut. The image was gone. I stood in the elevator watching the numbers count down. 40, 39, 38. Dante looked at me. He didn't say anything. He knew there were no words for this. He just handed me a handkerchief. I took it. I wiped a speck of soot from my eye. Is it over? Dante asked softly. I put the handkerchief in my pocket. I straightened my spine. Yes, I said. The demolition is complete. The elevator hit the ground floor. The doors opened. I walked out into the lobby, out into the gray Friday afternoon. The air smelled of rain and exhaust. It wasn't a perfect ending. My house was gone. My family was gone. My heart was scarred. But I was free. I was standing on my own 2 feet. And for the first time in a long time, the foundation felt solid. The sound of a diesel engine idling is a specific frequency that I have known my entire life. It is a low thrumming vibration that you feel in your teeth before you hear it with your ears. It is the sound of progress. It is the sound of change. And on this particular Tuesday, exactly 30 days after the fire that almost claimed my life, it was the sound of a yellow Caterpillar bulldozer sitting in the middle of my driveway. I stood by the front gate, the iron bars still soot-stained and twisted from the heat. I was wearing a hard hat and a high-visibility vest over a crisp button-down shirt. I wasn't wearing the sweatpants anymore. I wasn't the confused old man shuffling through a hospital ward. I was Lucius King, structural engineer, and I was supervising my final demolition. The operator, a young man named Ramirez, who reminded me a little of myself 40 years ago, leaned out of the cab. "Are you sure about this?" Mr. King Ramirez shouted over the rumble of the engine. "The foundation is still good. We could save the slab. We could scrape the debris and you could rebuild right on top of it. It would save you $50,000 in concrete." I looked at the blackened ruins of the mansion. I looked at the skeleton of the east wing where my bedroom used to be. I looked at the charred remains of the dining room where Braden had toasted to my death. I looked at the nursery window now, just a jagged hole in the sky where Tasha used to sleep. I shook my head. "Take it all, Ramirez," I said. "The slab, the footings, the driveway. I want it all gone. I want you to dig until you hit raw earth." Ramirez shrugged, pulled the lever, and the machine roared to life. The massive steel blade dropped. It bit into the debris, pushing a mountain of ash, twisted metal, and memories toward the dump trucks waiting on the street. I watched the walls come down. A lot of people would cry seeing their home destroyed. They would see the loss of asset value. They would see the destruction of their history. But I didn't see destruction. I saw excavation. A house is just an arrangement of materials. Wood, glass, steel, stone. It is the people inside who give it structural integrity. And the people who had filled this house were rotten. The memories here were infected. Every time I looked at that dining room, I didn't see Thanksgiving dinners anymore. I saw Braden's greedy smile. Every time I looked at the hallway, I didn't see Tasha taking her first steps. I saw her walking away from me with a bus ticket in her hand. The foundation was poisoned. You cannot build a strong future on a cracked past. A black sedan pulled up to the curb behind me. The door opened and Director Sterling stepped out. He wasn't wearing his intimidating boardroom suit today. He was wearing a trench coat against the chill wind, holding a thick roll of documents. "Mr. King," Sterling said, standing beside me and watching the bulldozer crush a grand piano that had survived the fire only to be flattened by the cleanup. It is a hell of a thing to watch. It is necessary, I said. Sterling nodded. He handed me the documents. Here is the finalized paperwork from the trust, he said. The Veterans Association has formally accepted the donation of the $5 million. As per the bylaws of your trust, the funds were liquidated from your personal estate and transferred to the charity immediately upon the confirmation of criminal intent by the beneficiaries. I took the papers. I felt the weight of them. $5 million. The money Braden had killed for. The money Tasha had betrayed me for. And here is the second part. Sterling continued, pulling out a second envelope. Since the Veterans Association is a non-profit focused on structural engineering scholarships, they have voted on their first major capital project. He smiled, a genuine warm expression that softened his stony face. They have approved the grant proposal for the King Technical Institute. I opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check. Not for me, but for the construction company I had formed 3 days ago. They are hiring you, Mr. King, Sterling said, to build it, to run it, to teach. The money went a full circle. It left your hands bypassed, the thieves went to the soldiers, and now it is coming back to the soil. I looked at the check. It was enough. It was enough to build something that would last longer than a mansion. You could have just kept the money, Lucius Sterling said quietly. You could have revoked the trust after Braden went to jail. You could be on a beach in Florida right now. I looked at the bulldozer. It was tearing up the rose bushes my wife had planted. It hurt, but it was a clean pain. I don't like beaches, Director, I said. Sand shifts. It is unstable. I like concrete. I like steel. I like things that stand up when the wind blows. I unrolled the blueprints I was carrying under my arm. I spread them out on the hood of Sterling's car. Look at this, I said, tracing the white lines with my finger. Sterling leaned in. It isn't a house, he observed. No, I said. It is a school. I pointed to the main hall. This is the workshop. I explained, my voice gaining animation. High ceilings. Reinforced gantry cranes. We are going to bring in engines. We are going to bring in steel beams. We are going to teach kids from the south side, kids who have nothing, kids like I used to be, how to build. I moved my finger to the classrooms. And here, this is where we teach them the math. But not just the math of physics, the math of life. We are going to teach them that if you cut a corner, the building falls. We are going to teach them that if you use cheap materials, the bridge collapses. We are going to teach them that integrity isn't just a moral concept. It is a physical requirement. Sterling looked at the plans. He looked at me. You are building a legacy, he said. I am building a fortress, I corrected. Braden and Tasha, they thought wealth was about what you can buy. They thought it was about yachts and champagne and status. They didn't understand that true wealth is what you can create. They wanted the fruit, but they didn't want to plant the tree. I rolled up the blueprints. This school will be full of kids with dirty hands, I said. Kids with grease under their fingernails. Kids who smell like sweat. And I am going to teach them that those dirty hands are the only things that keep the world from falling apart. Ramirez honked the horn of the bulldozer. He pointed to a pile of debris near the back fence. It was the remains of the gazebo where Tasha had been married. All gone, Mr. King, Ramirez shouted. We are down to dirt. I looked at the raw, dark earth exposed to the sunlight for the first time in 30 years. It looked rich. It looked ready. Good, I shouted back. Grade it flat. We pour the new foundation on Monday. Sterling shook my hand. He gripped it hard. Good luck, Lucius. I have a feeling this is going to be your best work. It already is, I said. Sterling got back in his car and drove away. I stood there alone, watching the dust settle. I thought about Tasha. I wondered if she was in Cleveland yet. I wondered if she was standing in a line for a job interview, realizing that her last name didn't open doors anymore. I wondered if she missed me. Probably not. She missed the ATM. She missed the safety net. But she would learn. Necessity is the best teacher of structural engineering. When you have no support beams left, you learn to stand up on your own or you crumble. I hoped for her sake she would stand. And Braden. I checked my watch. It was 2 in the afternoon. In the federal detention center, it was laundry time. I pictured him standing over a steaming vat of prison uniforms, scrubbing the stains out of other men's clothes. I pictured him earning his 40 cents. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a quarter and a dime and a nickel. 40 cents. I looked at the coins in my palm. Work hard, son, I whispered to the wind. Compound interest is a killer. I tossed the coins into the dirt, an offering to the ground, a seed for the future. I turned away from the empty lot. I walked toward my truck, my boots crunching on the gravel. I felt light. I felt strong. I was 70 years old. My house was gone. My family was gone. But I had a roll of blueprints under my arm. I had a check in my pocket, and I had a crew coming on Monday. I climbed into the truck and started the engine. It roared to life, a powerful, honest sound. I put it in gear and drove away from the ashes, heading toward the lumberyard. The fire had taken the past, but it had left me the future. And this time, I was going to build it fireproof. The smell of fresh pine sawdust is better than any expensive cologne I ever bought when I was trying to play the part of the retired gentleman. It hangs in the air of my new office, mixing with the aroma of strong black coffee and the metallic tang of drafting tools. I was sitting at a wide table made of reclaimed oak, a drafting square in my hand, looking at the blueprints for the new west wing of the King Technical Institute. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny stars. Outside, I could hear the sounds of industry. The whine of a table saw the rhythmic pounding of hammers and the shouting of young voices, learning the difference between a load-bearing wall and a partition. It had been 6 months since the bulldozer cleared the lot on Highland Avenue. 6 months since I watched my past turn into dirt. And in those 6 months, I had aged backward. My back was straighter. The tremor in my hands was gone, replaced by the steady grip of a man who wakes up every morning with a purpose. I wasn't Lucius the victim anymore. I was Mr. King, the teacher, the builder, the man who was turning the discarded youth of Chicago into the architects of the future. The door to my office opened. I didn't look up immediately. I was calculating the sheer strength of a steel lintel. "Put the coffee on the desk," I said, "and don't spill it on the schematics." A heavy chuckle filled the room. "I didn't bring you coffee, Lou. I brought you closure." I looked up. Dante was standing there. He wasn't wearing his dress uniform, and he wasn't wearing the undercover baseball cap. He was wearing a simple leather jacket and jeans, holding 2 steaming paper cups from the deli down the street. He looked relaxed, the tension around his eyes finally gone. I put down my pencil. "Closure," I repeated. "That is a heavy word, Dante." He walked over and sat in the chair opposite my desk. He took a sip of his coffee, savoring the moment. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded newspaper. He slid it across the oak table. "Page 4, Dante said. "Bottom left column." I picked up the paper. I didn't need my reading glasses. The headline was small, buried under news about city budgets and sports scores, but the names jumped out at me like neon signs. Local real estate developer sentenced in arson scheme. I read the article. It was short, factual, dry. Braden Cole, 35, was sentenced yesterday to 20 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for arson, insurance fraud, and attempted murder. The judge cited the premeditated nature of the crime and the callous disregard for human life in handing down the maximum sentence. 20 years, I whispered. Dante nodded. He will be 55 when he gets out. If he gets out. I read the next paragraph. Cole's assets have been seized to pay court costs. A garnishment order has been placed on all future earnings to satisfy a private debt judgment held by the victim. Dante reached into his other pocket. He pulled out a small white envelope. It had the logo of the Federal Bureau of Prisons stamped on the corner. "This came to my office this morning," Dante said. "Since I was the arresting officer, they forwarded it. It is for you." I took the envelope. I opened it. Inside was a check, a government check. I looked at the amount, $14.50. I looked up at Dante. "Laundry duty." Dante said, a small smile playing on his lips. "He started last week. 40 hours. He is scrubbing sheets, Lou. And every penny he earned minus the cost of his toothbrush is right there in your hand." I looked at the check again. $14. It wasn't enough to buy a good lunch, but it was the most valuable piece of paper I had ever held. It was proof. Proof that the system worked. The system. Proof that actions have consequences. Proof that Braden Cole, the man who wanted millions for doing nothing, was finally learning the value of a dollar the hard way. I folded the check carefully and put it in my shirt pocket right next to my heart. "I am going to frame this," I said. "I am going to hang it in the lobby, right next to the donor plaque." "And Tasha?" I asked. I didn't look at him when I asked. I looked out the window at the students pouring concrete in the yard. Dante sighed. He leaned back in his chair. "She is in Cleveland," he said. "My contact in the precinct there checked up on her. She is living in a studio apartment above a garage. It is not much." "Is she working?" "She is," Dante said. "She got a job at a diner on Route 9, the Night Owl. She works the graveyard shift, waitressing, tips only." I nodded slowly. The graveyard shift, hard work, unforgiving work. My daughter, who used to complain if her latte was too foam heavy, was now carrying heavy trays of greasy food to truckers at 3 in the morning. She was standing on her feet for 8 hours a night. She was counting nickels and dimes. "Is she okay?" I asked. "She is tired," Dante said. "She looks 10 years older. But she is paying her rent. She is buying her own groceries. She isn't asking anyone for handouts." I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pity. It was a faint, distant flicker of pride. "Good," I said. "She is finally building a foundation. It is a humble one, but it is real. Maybe in a few years, when she understands what it means to earn a living, she will be ready to build something bigger. But not yet." "Not yet," Dante agreed. He finished his coffee and stood up. He looked around the office at the framed photos of my students at the awards we had already won for community service. "You did good," Lou Dante said. "You took a pile of ashes and built a castle. Most men would have folded." I stood up and walked around the desk. I shook his hand. The grip was firm, solid. "I didn't do it alone, Dante. You provided the reinforcements." Dante grinned. "Just doing my job, Mr. King. Just doing my job." He walked to the door. He paused, looking back. "What are you going to do with the check?" The $14, I patted my pocket. "I am going to buy pizza," I said, "for the class. They have been working hard on the framing project. They deserve a reward." Dante laughed and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. I was alone again. But the silence wasn't empty. It was full of potential. I walked to the window. Down in the courtyard, the bell had just rung. A group of 20 students was gathering around the sawhorse tables. They were a motley crew, kids with tattoos, kids with baggy clothes, kids who had been told by society that they were broken, that they were dangerous, that they were trash. I saw Ramirez, the young man who had driven the bulldozer. He was showing a new girl how to hold a level. He was patient. He was kind. He was teaching. I watched them. They didn't know I was rich. They didn't know about the millions I had donated. They didn't know about the mansion that used to stand on the hill. To them, I was just Lucius. The old man who knew how things worked. The man who didn't yell when they made a mistake but showed them how to fix it. The man who treated them with dignity. They respected me, not because of my name, not because of my bank account, but because I showed up, because I got my hands dirty, because I gave them the tools to build their own lives. That was the only legacy that mattered. Braden wanted a yacht. Tasha wanted a condo. I wanted this. I wanted to see the light turn on in a kid's eyes when he realized he could build a wall that would stand for 100 years. I turned back to my desk. I looked at the blueprints. I picked up my pencil. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank, the automatic deposit from the prison system. Another 40 cents had been added to my account. I smiled. I wasn't Lucius the victim. I wasn't Lucius the survivor. I was Lucius the architect, and my masterpiece wasn't a building. It was the future. I folded the blueprints. I rolled them up and tucked them under my arm. I grabbed my hard hat from the hook on the wall. I put it on. It fit perfectly. I walked to the door. I turned off the lights in the office, leaving the room bathed in natural sunlight. I walked out into the hall toward the sound of the saws and the hammers, toward my family, the family I had chosen, the family I had built. Fire can burn down a house. It can burn down a lie. It can burn down a life built on greed. But fire cannot touch the truth. They say fire destroys, but it also reveals. It strips away the paint, the facade, and the lies, leaving only the structural truth beneath. My son-in-law thought he could burn down my legacy to build his own upon the ashes. He forgot that I am the architect. I know where the load-bearing walls are, and I know exactly which pillar to pull to make the whole house of cards collapse. Never mistake a quiet man for a weak one. We are simply calculating the structural integrity of your betrayal before we bring the roof down on your head. Fire might consume wood and stone, but it tempers steel. And I am steel. If you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring more stories like this to life. And let me know in the comments, do you think Tasha deserves a second chance, or is she exactly where she belongs? I read every single comment. Thanks for watching, and remember, build your life on a foundation that fire can't destroy. See you in the next video.